All right, Julie, we are here on our second episode of Roll for Mastery. However, this will probably be the first one that we actually upload to YouTube or publish, as they say, because we had some technical difficulties last time where you could hear me and we couldn't hear Julie at all. So we've
I
tweaked
was mute.
this. We've worked on our technical difficulties and hoping we get it right tonight, fingers crossed. And if we do, we will get this uploaded or published here to YouTube in a couple weeks' time. While we haven't discussed this in depth, we're thinking probably about a 2 week delay from the time we record to the time we publish so that we minimize the chance of spoiler alerts for the games that we're currently running. So, Julie, if you would, do you want to introduce us and Roll for Mastery?
Again.
Well, it's the first time we're recording really for anyone, or hopefully.
I am Julie. I am I guess, the fifth edition Dungeon Master. I am in my late 20s, early 30s, so I am the younger one. And we are doing a podcast where we talk ins and outs of not only Dungeons and Dragons and the differences between generations, 1E, 5E, but also about just generalized different Dungeon Master styles and player styles and how we can come together to solve similar issues that we both meet at the same table, which is why we also decided on the name of the podcast stream, whatever we're calling it.
Playlist at
Um,
least? I don't know.
yeah, something like that. The mastery through the ages kind of thing, because we have both sides of the spectrum. We have a 1980s versus a 2024 and beyond kind of experience on both sides.
I think that's.
Bless you.
Thank you. Oh, did you hear me? I had muted that.
You did, but I saw the
Oh,
action.
all right. So, yes, I think that's a good introduction to what we're trying to do here. But again, really, our target audience for Julie and I is really ourselves. We're recording this really for a video archiving, excuse me, video archiving. But some of the players in our groups have expressed interest, and therefore we said we'll actually publish it to YouTube and not just have it in our own channel that's private. So that's kind of what we're going to do here. But um, I think Julie's pretty good on her description there. It's just two DMs that get together every couple weeks, talk about DMing and our games, brainstorm a few things, discuss some hot topics, on occasion, and that's what we're going to do. But Julie did introduce me in an indirect kind of way. My name is Keith. I am a 1E first edition D&D player, true and true. I've dabbled a little bit with 5E with Julie, um, and while I enjoyed it, it's not quite my cup of tea. So I stick with my 1E because it's what I know, and that's what I enjoy most. So, with that said, Julie, tell me about what's going on with your group. What's going on with your table? We were talking earlier about all this money that you guys have. You guys are like rolling in dough.
So we had you actually had suggested you had brought up a topic of controversial statements. Should a dungeon master be paid? Should you go to a table and pay your dungeon master? Because dungeon masters wear all the hats, they do all the work. At some tables, they even fork up all the dough. So, should a dungeon master be paid hourly? And I think one of my players really dove into a private discussion with you and then brought it back to my attention later of a shared idea that you guys had for a party fund, a player run DM controlled party fund. Not necessarily DM control, I guess anybody could control it. The party could vote to have the most trustworthy individual hold the pot. I suggested it was electronic to try and help people who didn't want to physically bring me cash and show off this wad of cash and hand me cash. But nobody wanted the electronic idea. Anyway, it's just a pot of money that players can add to whenever they want, whether it be weekly, bi-weekly, or whenever they have the fungible uh, money allowed. Even if it's a dollar or even if it's change, pocket change, I don't really care. It is party led, so if they want to put a bunch of money in it to spend a bunch of money, they can. We do pizza every night on Friday, and as lovely as the local pizza place is, it is a local business that the store supports, and I really do like that. But pizza gets old after a while, and pizza once a week every week can get old after a while, and a lot of my players have expressed that as well. So a lot of them, I think, are really digging the idea of different food choices for the party fund because there's so many little restaurants in that area of town. A couple of my players get there really early, so they could go get the food, bring it, and then everybody would have food as they showed up. Um, Another suggestion that you yourself made was that we could do a free raffle. I was holding raffles through the store for 3D printed goodies, Dungeon and Dragon themed goodies, dice towers, and things like that. And the party would pay for raffle tickets like a real raffle, and then shove the tickets where they would want what items they wanted, and then we would hold the raffle at the end of the night. I was doing it like once a month, but Keith suggested that maybe with that big Beetle Pool party fund, we all get matching T-shirts or matching buttons or matching socks, or we hold a raffle with a bunch of random items. Um, it looks like my party is currently at this very moment blowing Discord up with all of their ideas about what to have for this raffle. So I think it really ignited something inside of them. I think they're pretty excited about it. I posted my favorite one. My favorite one is a T-shirt, and it says "Never Sunny in Barovia," which is a play on words as it's always sunny in Philadelphia. And it has like a setting moody sun, and there's like gravestones in the background.
Yeah, I saw that.
My
And I
favorite.
thought that was kind of applicable to you guys, right? Like you said,
I
sunny
love it.
sunny in Philly and across Barovia, and it's the vampire darkness. Um, but
Yes.
what I had in mind for you guys, and of course it's not my table, and I'm not, I have no skin in the game,
Very
as they
well.
say. But I was thinking
I could
something
anonymously suggest.
something like a more of a customized print for you guys, that makes, I don't know if you came up with a name for yourselves, Julie's Minions, whatever it might be, right? But something that's a little more personalized to you guys versus a generically printed T-shirt to kind of that everyone has. Even that one though that you posted there on Discord that you're
Isn't Etsy? It's
that you're
what do you
describing.
call it?
I mean, I think it's still applicable, and you guys would all enjoy that. But at least I thought, and I do like that though. The thought I had was kind of something custom printed for you guys,
With like our character names
or
or
or, or
something
something,
like
or
that.
even or if someone amongst you is is a good artist, maybe they could draft something up so that way it's unique to you guys and not something that
Yeah.
anyone can buy, right? Even though it's on Etsy, anyone in the world can buy that exact same T-shirt, you know.
Yeah.
So
I'll see what some of them Nee draws well. Corey has a friend who draws well. Um Nee draws all the time. He draws on his little he has like this teeny tiny little like Kindle. It's tiny. It's very small. And he doodles on it every once in a while. And usually when he shows the party, I'm like, "Oh, that looks great."
And speaking of Nee, a shout out to Nee for my chocolates. Thank you very much.
He always donates to
He
you an
does.
entire
He
bag of
does. He's
white
such a
chocolate.
thoughtful guy. Every week he comes in, he comes in this little bag of chocolates for me. So,
Um he recently made me weights for my dungeon maps. He like soldered
wait.
weights. Yeah, like
For you,
metal, like iron weights.
what dungeon map are you talking about?
Just my curly one that I keep in a
Oh,
cardboard
okay, okay,
tube.
oh, okay. I thought that belonged to
Battle map.
James. Yeah, I thought that was James.
No, James has these really cool. He bought a one, it probably an Amazon official one, and it has these plastic like
Yes.
like things,
Yep.
and you put it on the edges of the map, and it makes it flat.
Correct. Yep. As a matter of fact, that
Artie posted one that was like a scroll, and you like turn the scroll.
the one you talk about for James, I'd seen that exact same one he has. I have in my shopping list for Amazon. I
Yeah,
just
I remember you telling her that. You're
Yeah.
like, I have that one.
So I mean, I use a battle board, the boards versus the mat or the roll, and they have their pros and cons. Having
The
used the
boards
board for
every
a while
time.
now, I think I'm more in favor of a battle map, or excuse me, a battle mat, something I can roll up, right? Because
Right.
the whole rolling aspect, that's easily put some weights on the corners, or like you said, there's little plastic strips that came with his, and it kind of resolves that. The boards are kind of big, they're heavy, and in a way
They fall funny.
they're bulky because it takes a lot of space in my backpack. But then again, so does a 3 foot tube that wouldn't fit in my
I
backpack at
just get
all.
the tube at the store.
You know.
My whole trunk is dedicated to Dungeons and Dragons, but I do drive a coupe, so there is that. It's a very tiny trunk. I drive a
That's because
race
you
car.
lug around all that terrain and those minis and stuff that you have.
I have one case of minis, and then I have my bog bag. My bog bag has dice, it has my dungeon screen, it has my speaker, and I currently have a bunch of holders with all my mods. And my book bag has books like Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and then it has my COS big book, and I have a clipboard in there with all of my. Now I don't need the initiative pages that I was using. Now I'm gonna have to just find ones that have health and AC, like important information, so I could jot that down really quickly and keep track of diminishing health. But I had one that was initiative order on one side, and then it had a middle column for important PC information, like if they had a player fighting with them, I could put that the helper, the NPC in the middle. And then on the other side, it was a list. It was three columns, and the first column was the monster's name. The middle column is AC, and then the third column is HP. And the HP line is very big. Um, and the other two lines aren't quite as big. The AC line is very small, and then the player name, I mean, the monster name is somewhere in the middle. Um, and I really like that to diminish to do the math on the health as I keep going, and to keep track of the AC as I keep going. But I have to keep the stupid book open anyway. I should probably make flashcards, as you suggested previously.
So, how often do you reference the DMG during your gameplay?
Never.
Okay. So,
Until my players hit madness, in which case I'm thinking about just copying, like photocopying the madness tables and keeping those in my folder.
I sent you a PDF on
I thought
Discord
that
on
was
that.
yeah, I thought that was another guy. I didn't think that was the
Well,
official one.
no, it's not the official. That actually came from Sly Flourish for the Lazy Dungeon Master.
It's very similar. The first couple for the instant madness or short-term madness are very similar. I didn't look at the long-term ones. My attention span immediately
Okay.
left.
So the couple of
I
thoughts
didn't
I
read
had in
through all
there
of it.
to kind of lighten your load, because
It is just one page.
every week you and I DM at the same time, same place, right? We have different games, different editions, but same time, same place. And we bring our stuff in, and I bring my backpack. And in that
You
back,
left your speaker.
yeah, I know. Yeah, I already reached out to
Okay,
Mike on
good.
that. Yeah, thank you. Um, I do not bring a copy of the DMG or the Monster Manual. I don't, because I have access to both on my phone if need be, PDF online.
My phone is
And
too old.
the
It dies so
the
fast.
um, the Monster Manual, like I really don't need because I prepped and I know what they're going to encounter, and I already have that. Yeah, yeah, I'll scold you on that every chance I get. Um, the so I prep for
Bad.
that, so I know what they're going to run into, or likely to run into. I have the I have my module, my adventure that has most of that in there already for me. So I don't need
A
the
lot of
monster manual.
mine My weird ones are in the back of the book. Sometimes it'll be on the page, but most of the time I have to open the monster manual. Like for shadows, ghouls, ghasts, I had to open the monster manual. For the last boss in the death house, it's a shambling mound that is
Hmm.
being reskinned to be a flesh mound. It's like an amalgamation. And there is an adjusted stat block in my mod. So I have the adjusted stat block in the mod, so I don't need to reference the monster manual. But like if they do a short rest in the stupid house again, I'm gonna have to pull it back out because I don't have any of the other stuff in cards forms.
All right, so for those of you who, I'll say this is a spoiler alert, but it's not really. For those of you who are
Some
watching, Julie and I have discussed on more than one occasion about appropriate or proper prep by the DM for a given game session. And see, and she's smiling, she's saying, you read her lips, right? So while that's a whole other topic of debate, of like how much to prep, how long to prep for, what to prep, and so on, we're not going to get into that tonight. Um, but Julie has a self-admitted problem with not prepping properly or and I'll say sufficiently, and that's why or one of the reasons why she having to, which she's disclosing what she did, and she's bringing the books that she does. So with the proper prep, as I'm encouraging her to focus a little more energy on, um, some of that can be subsided. But to the point of proper prep, I'm trying to introduce her to the book, The Lazy Dungeon Master by Sly Flourish, as well as The Secret Art of Game Mastery, The Secret Art of Preparation. Both of those are written by Luke Hart, from the DM Layer channel here on YouTube.
Mhm,
Not
mhm.
I'm giving a specific plug for him or associate with him in any way, but I backed his Kickstarter on that. I have a copy of it, and something like that can be helpful too. There are plenty of resources out there, right, for DMs to learn how to prep, to learn how to take notes, to learn how to do this aspect, how to run this campaign, and so on. So there's plenty of material, plenty of resources out there for DMs. They just need to kind of capitalize on it. But so any chance I get, I kind of scold Julie on her prep, because that is something we had talked about prior to her starting this Curse of Strahd, and how voluptuous, Curse of Strahd is, and how it takes prep, weekly prep for her weekly game. Now,
I took like 3 weeks of very hardcore prep, and I think it exhausted me a little bit. And now I need to get back on the saddle and re-prep.
I will
But
admit that often,
they've been stuck in the same place for 5 sessions. I stopped doing it.
okay, and okay, that's an excellent point, because the point, and that's the point I was going to make, that like in our campaign that Julie and I play together in on Tuesday nights. Julie's the player, I'm the DM, and they've been in this, farming village for months worth of gameplay. So the first few weeks I was prepping. I was, understanding who the NPCs were, what their involvement in the town was, political associations, if any, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and so on. And after 3, 4 weeks of that, 5 weeks of that, I felt pretty comfortable with who everyone was, at least enough where I could, wing it if I had to. So I'm at a point now that we're a couple months into gameplay in this village, that I'm not prepping like I was, because like I said, I know that already. Now, as they're transitioning out of town and getting ready to dungeon crawl, well, I don't know that because we haven't made it that far yet. So now I need to really start prepping for that on a weekly basis, so I don't get caught with my pants down, and then I'm scrambling and it looks like I got caught with my pants down. Because the last thing I want at least I want as a DM, is I don't want it to look like I'm unprepared. Because
I
from
don't like taking back what I say. It makes me look like an asshole. Pardon my French, but
well,
I don't like,
I certainly wouldn't use that
here's this
adjective, but
thing. And then they're like, "What?" And then I read it and I go, "Oh, my bad. It's actually this thing." And they're like, "Okay." And I'm like, "I'm sorry." Like
yeah.
a great example is the other night I accidentally confused my players. It was a dirt ramp down into an amount of water. I messed up not only the ramp down but the amount of water. So I was thinking it was a 20-foot slope into 20 feet of water. And so I was thinking it was water to slope and you couldn't see the bottom slope. But actually, in all actuality, I reread the information at the very end of the session because everyone was confused. It's a 20-foot slope and then 3 feet of water. And I missed that because I didn't reread the descriptive. It was only like one paragraph that I
Okay.
missed.
All right. So, but when that happens, and that happens to everyone, right? And that's happened to me too. So
Awful.
the question is, how do you adjust on the fly? Is it worthy of you backpedaling and saying, "Oh shit, guys, I didn't describe that right. This is how it's supposed to be," or do you just roll with it and you adjust on the fly to what you just described, right? And that's a call the DM needs to make in that moment. And depending upon the situation, you could argue for either scenario, right? So if it's going to be very impactful on the game as,
Oh, it was.
as to what's moving forward, then you might need to retract that, because if not, then you have to modify or adjust everything moving forward until they get out of that area, right? But if
That
it's not
that
going to be
last
hugely
area,
impactful, then you can just roll with that description and go with it.
that last area is where you fight the final boss. So 3 feet of water is definitely a different battle than 20 feet of water. I
Yes.
wasn't going to
Okay.
have them fight a shambling mound in 20 feet of water.
Underwater, right? Okay, but could there be a way with that 20 feet depth somehow reduced or subsided from the time you described it to the time they go back to fight the guy?
No, because they're immediately going in.
Oh, immediately.
And then
Okay. Okay.
I ended the session with one of my players misty stepping like through the portcullis. He like cheated his way through the portcullis.
Okay. All right. 'Cause
And that's where I ended the session.
I'm trying to think of a specific example, and I can't right now. But I mean, I've made those mistakes before too, and I adjust on the fly, because more often than not, it's not a huge impact, or I can make an adjustment enough so it seems kind of seamless, right?
I
Um,
could have had the monster like smash a hole in the wall and it could have been like a phase two.
right, and drain the water out or something like that.
Drain the water out.
Yeah,
As he hit half health, drain the water out.
yeah,
But
yeah. But the moral of the story is a little bit of prep goes a long way.
I guess if I prepped that one day in advance, if I did my prep on Tuesday night, which is my optimum goal, spend a couple hours Tuesday night watching TV with my hubby, waiting for dinner to cook, and I prep my D&D session. Um, just the next session, just each time, just the
Hmm.
next session. And I read over the stat block, and I read over what's going to happen, and I read over what monsters are going to be there, and what they're going to do, and where they're potentially going to go, because you can never predict that. They might sit there and stare at a brick wall for 4 hours. You don't know. But uh, that's my ultimate goal is to just do it that little bit. But even that little bit of prep, would my little hamster brain have accurately put that information together on Friday during pure chaos at the very end of the night?
You know what helps with that?
Probably
Sticky
not.
notes, post-it
I
notes.
guess
Take a few
I need
notes.
to buy some.
You can slap it right in the campaign. Put it right in the campaign. You can also use them as little tabs, to mark different sections or what you might need to turn to. A little tab so you can go all the way back
Chapter
to the
tab.
back of the book to find that stat block, right?
Yeah,
So, but
I
again,
need those. There's little tiny ones too.
yeah,
Little
yeah,
like
yeah.
skinny
But
ones.
post-it note makes them specific for that. I'm usually on the cheap,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just use my regular post-it note and cut it and make my own and fold it over or whatever. But yes, but again, that comes down to prep, right? To even
Yeah.
have put those tabs
Sure.
in, or those different, like you said, chapter markers or something to that effect. So
I would like to do chapter markers. Does my little hamster brain remember to go by post-it notes at the end of the workday? Not really.
that's right. That's what Amazon is for. They bring it right to the
That's true. I could
house.
just order an ass ton of post-it notes on Amazon.
Yeah, and while you're there, if you need the laminating sheets too, because you had mentioned
Oh,
that for
I do
something.
need to
I
do
don't
that.
know for what, but
It's my DM screen
oh,
because
that's
my
right. That's right.
yeah, my trunk is not waterproof. Water is getting into it somehow, and it's not a lot of water, but it's enough to make the paper get all
Damp.
funny.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so everything's kind of like, and so I wanted to try and laminate it shut before any irreparable damage happened, and I wouldn't be able to use it. I'd have to buy new ones. Not like buying new ones. It's a pack of like 6 poster boards that I buy from Publix for like $4. So, and I print my own foreground, background,
I
the
not,
front of the DM screen, the
when
back
you
of the
say
DM
poster
screen.
board, like actual, like 3 foot by 2 foot poster board.
Yeah,
Try.
it's not 3 foot by 2 foot. It's actually smaller than that.
All right. Try the Dollar Tree.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I could buy however many for $1. The only problem with that is that it's a weird shape. It's like a little bit bigger than an A4 piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird, and I don't know if the 2 by 3s is enough to get 2 full sections. So then I have a bunch of like weird pieces. But I could try. I guess it's not
I
worth
mean,
it's not
for
worth
a buck and a quarter or whatever the Dollar Tree is, it's worth a
it.
try.
Yeah.
You know.
A pack of six at my job is like I think it's $3. It might be a little bit more, a little bit less. I might be misremembering, but
Mm.
it's a big enough sheet that it worked and it's poster board quality, so I didn't really super mind.
Thank you, Nee. So how is your
Shout
no
out.
initiative combat working out for you? Is it getting better?
Um It still gets a little funny because I still feel my players have gotten really nitty gritty on action economy. So much so that we reference your DIY action economy. Just go. I disappeared.
Yeah, you did.
Camera unavailable.
Hmm.
Hang on. Hang on. Video. Okay, that's weird. Well,
There you
oh,
are.
I'm back. Now it's odd. My camera just decided to murder itself. Anyway, um, no initiative combat. It gets a little weird
Yep.
because
Lost your camera
of
again. That's okay.
happening. It might be I'm playing with the cord on my headphones, and I bet you they're close together, and I'm knocking the video cord
Hmm.
out. I will stop doing that. But for no initiative combat, my players rely heavily on action economy, so much so that we have like nitty grittied your piece of paper, and I reference it all the time. Movement is weird because that's the biggest thing I struggle with because when the monsters move is a thing because if I move, everything happens at once. And that's something you have to remember that everything happens at once. But what, and I've asked this question before. The players make their decisions, right? They go around the table or the caller talks to them. I make my decision on what I'm doing while they're talking so that I already have a plan or I already make the plan and then I ask, okay, you go first. What are you doing? But in here, the monster plan has already happened.
Right.
I make the plan first. Um, if when they go, okay, I'm doing this, okay, I'm doing this, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, movement is where it gets silly because then after they go around the table and I do all of their stuff, the monsters then do their stuff. But when I do stuff like that, the players are all like, well, if I knew you were going to do that, I would have done it differently. And then they kind of like whine a little
That's
bit.
the whole concept, though.
But that, and that's my thing. And I think it's just because they're so used to traditional initiative combat that they feel it's unfair. And so I've just been stuck for most of my monsters. I just stay on one spot and I just try to attack things, which isn't how monsters usually do the thing, right? Monsters would run around. They would try to escape. They would try to, and I talk to you about that all the time, wanting to have more realistic monster encounters. And I don't mean that they whine and that it's annoying. I mean they just it's just what happens. And it's not always the same player. I'm not pinpointing one player versus another, because it's happened with a couple of my players. A couple of my players felt at one point in time last session that it was almost getting too hard or too exhausting. Um, and that was probably my random encounter table was a little intense. But I mean, and then on the other hand, I have other players who are like, no, this is what I want. Like, beat me up. Like, do the thing. I want to combat me. And so it's hard to be like, what do I do? But I just stick with it, and that's just what it is. And I try not to go back on what I said because then things get silly. Anyway, I still have issues with when the monsters move. Um, because I don't want the whole table to be like, combat fucking sucks. I I hate this. I can't be strategic at all, and I hate life. Um, and so like I said, I get stuck, and I feel bad because it's unrealistic.
So, have you thought about, and I know I sent you this in Discord, but have you thought about doing a whole session, even though it may be even a shorter session, where all you do is practice combat for the purpose of honing in on the no initiative combat?
Well, so Death House was a lot of combat. There's combat after combat after combat after combat after combat. So much so that I wore the party down so bad they had to take a long rest in the house. And during the long rest, I did the D12s thing where we matched D12s, except I only did it with the people who were taking watch. So it was me and two other players. So it's a dice roll of three. So if nobody matches on three dice, then nothing happens. But if somebody matches, a random encounter happens. And I roll a couple dice to see how many monsters show up and what monster shows up. And if the players can, finish each of the watches, they get their long rest. If not, then they get interrupted. The long rest gets interrupted, and the long rest doesn't happen because they die.
Right. All right. So it doesn't
I
really.
know you're not big on random
Well,
encounters.
no, and I was gonna bring that up too. But what? But that didn't really answer the question though. Have you thought about doing put Chris Estrad to the side and just have run a whole night of small encounter, a small combat, small combat, small combat, just to get the gist of the no initiative, to kind of get a chance to
Like
practice
a
this,
one shot.
practice that. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be one shot. It doesn't have to be a storyline at all. Just create a scenario, create a room, an outdoor scene, whatever. And here's the bad guy. Here are the good guys. Let's just role play the combat. We're not going to talk. No one's going to try to negotiate. Nothing. We're just practicing combat. So you guys can physically walk through the mechanics of the no initiative combat and say, oh shit, that didn't work well. Okay, so we'll finish this combat, and next combat we're going to do here in 10 minutes, or whenever you finish, we're going to try making that adjustment, and let's try that and see
Hmm.
how that works. In essence,
Hmm.
you're truly test playing. You're beta
Right.
testing.
I would probably. I don't know if that's everybody's Jimmy Jam, and I would throw it out there, and whoever wants to show up can show up. And maybe it's not on a Friday night, and maybe I do it on a Saturday night when something else is going on, or a Saturday afternoon when something else is going on. Um, Maybe I do it on a day when I have an every other Saturday campaign that I play with Chase and Gabe, and maybe Chase and Gabe would help me, test run no initiative combat an hour or two before the session starts.
Okay.
And it starts at 5. So like let's say, okay, let's meet at 3, and we just run I'll give you guys an NPC and we'll run a 3-player no initiative playtest. That way I can try and get my grasp around it. Because Chase feels so bad for me because I guess I look so confused. Something. He, poor guy. I know he does it because he wants me to grasp it. He wants to help me learn. He would be a good teacher, to tell you the truth. He would be a good like high school teacher, like older kid teacher, because his patient levels, although seem high, are not. his his social energy level is low. Um, so he can only do it for a short amount of time. Anyway, um, he has offered, "Do you want to watch me do it? Would you watching me do it help you?" He said, I kind of feel like I have a little bit tighter of a grasp on what's going on and how all the little steps are going to happen and what you may or may not be confused on. Would you like to watch me do it? And I said, we could do it maybe on a different random encounter. Would you want to run a, because we're going to have an ass ton of random encounters on the road. Once they go into the Slavich woods, going from town to town, there's a bunch of random encounters that can happen. I have two separate tables for combat and non-combat encounters, depending on where they are in the map. Because the monsters change depending on what biome you're in. Um, Swamp monsters versus, well, the winery monsters are like dryads versus like if you go like up into the Amber Temple's like snow monsters and flame skulls, and so the monsters kind of change depending on where you're at. And I was like, so because we're gonna have so many random encounters, I suggested, since the next couple fights are going to be just 1v1s, the Shambling Mound, and then as soon as my players get to Barovia, they might fight some zombies or some rats if they pick the wrong house. I tell them it's abandoned. They want to go in there anyway and be little, like, treasure hobos and try and find all the treasure they can. Maybe they get accosted by a rat or two or a zombie. They meet their first Strahd zombie and its arm falls off and it goes to attack them. Um, but the only combat encounter that happens in the village of Barovia is Doru, who is a adolescent. He's a youth, and he got turned into a vampire um, purely because Strahd hates his dad.
I
Just
I
a
I, I
pure
want.
spite
Hang
against
on.
his dad.
Let me stop you for a second.
So it's just a 1v1, and then a 1v1.
Okay.
And that's all I have for the next like 8 sessions.
All right. You are being Julie, and you're talking a lot about what's up and coming. So
Oh,
I
well.
don't want you revealing too much if we publish this here even in 2 weeks' time, because it sounds like you're describing
Oh, I'm sorry.
a little ways ahead.
No,
So
you're right. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Spoiler alert!
Okay. So maybe we'll have to delay this publication, but nonetheless,
Put a timestamp that says that there's a COS spoiler at whatever time.
um, but hang on, I have a few thoughts in there. Random encounters is certainly one of them. Oh no, the play testing. So okay, so a random encounter, that's fine. So he can DM the random encounter. You can participate or just step back and watch, but it doesn't have to be during regular gameplay, right? So when the three of you on the whatever Saturday play tests, then you be the player and let him DM that for you.
Right, and I was so we're doing it this Saturday is our thing. So I'm about to after we get off, I'm about to text Chase and be like, "Hey yo, Chase, want to know no initiative combat with me and Gabe on Saturday before we
So,
start session?"
I really wish, since I introduced you to this, I really wish I knew 5e better so that I could demo it for you. I
Yeah,
really
5e
do. Yeah, the five like a
complicated.
5e no initiative combat. It just I don't, and so therefore I would probably struggle adapting it as you are. It's super easy in 1e, and especially for my playstyle where I make decision calls all the time and don't I'm not rolling for every 2 seconds. And you know that because you play 1e with me, so
The dice gods.
you know how I do that. But I'm more than happy to if you want to send one of your guys on loan to come sit at my table during a combat, because I only run the no initiative combat, as you know. We're in the same building at the same time. So if you want to send one of you guys over, or if you're not playing in 2 weeks' time, as you had mentioned, if I can get a couple of you guys to come play, they'll see some no
Not
initiative
this
combat.
week,
Right, yeah, not this week. It'll
but
be the following is the one in question.
it's 4/4. It's my birthday.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for
I have a
disclosing that to the
birthday.
world. Good job.
Oh, well. Hello. It's on my Facebook. That's fine.
Yeah. That's okay. I won't even get into how I stalk people on Facebook. Anyway, so but yeah, so
Been
that's
there.
something too, and I had put that in Discord as well, knowing that you may not play in a couple weeks' time, that if anyone wants to come join our table, we do have a couple seats open.
Well, and I don't really have any plans. I thought about going out of town and like going camping or something like easy, like a couple hours out of town, like going to the beach or going camping, like something close. But I haven't actually made that plan, and I don't actually know if I took off work or not. So just in case, I wanted to try and see if anybody not only wanted to play on my birthday, maybe we could do something silly and do a very silly one shot for my birthday and just be silly goobers. And maybe do something. I told you like the drinking rules and how that drinking rule, all three of those tables could just be used as a whole campaign. And maybe we do a tavern. You're inside a tavern the whole campaign, and a bunch of shenanigans happen and I could utilize that whole drinking table. I thought about doing a COS, Curse of Strahd like themed. You're stuck in a tavern and doing like a bunch of drinking games and stuff like that with Curse of Strahd like characters involvement. And it would be a non-canon like one shot. I thought that would be really fun, but it would be a lot of weird prep for me. Um,
Is
it wouldn't just be silly
the
shenanigans.
party in a place where you could actually have like an in-game one shot, so it still is in full alignment with Curse of Strahd? I'll give you
Yeah,
the example. So last night, Tuesday, we played, right? We're playing
yeah.
against the Cult of the Reptile God, and you guys are leaving town, the farming village, where I mentioned earlier that you guys have been there for in game time. You've only been there for 3 or 4 or 5 days or something, but in real time, we've been playing this for a couple months now.
Hmm.
You guys have figured out what's going on, and you said, "Oh shit, big bad guys over there. We need to go there." And it's several days travel, and you guys just started that travel. And we kind of had almost a little bit of a side quest, if you will, or a one shot last night, where you guys came upon the Elven village, and had an
And
opportunity
now we're looking for a cleric, and now we're gonna do a side quest for this cleric.
and had an opportunity to interact with them, right? Befriend them, gain some intelligence or some knowledge or some surveillance or whatever it is it's you'd want to call it or whatever it turns out to be. You do have that opportunity, if you will, for a potential little side quest as one of your party members, one of the characters has been blinded and he's kind of back there in town, just fingers crossed,
Ugh. Yeah.
while the rest of the party is pressing on to the big bad guy. So while there's a dilemma there as to what to do, but that whole little Elven Village thing was a little bit of a one shot
Quest.
in a sense,
Yeah.
right? Because while that unto itself is kind of germane to the storyline, not really, but it was an opportunity for you guys to, like I said, talk and gain some knowledge to either affirm or dispute what you've learned so far. So could you do something like that for the players for like your silly one shot while it's still kind of in a line or in accord with Curse of Strahd? Are they in a
I wish
physical position to do that?
I wish we were in a different place because my mod has 3 additional sections added to it. Actually, no, there's 4. There's 4 additional sections added to it, which could all be run as one shots, but they're story relevant one shots. So there's a couple things in one of the towns that are added on. And then there's one more one shot added on to a different town that is like adjacent to the town, but is still relevant because you gain something from that one shot to help the problem somewhere else. Um, what's the fourth one? I just said there was 4, and now I can't even remember the fourth one. Oh, the fourth one is at the end, the very end of the game. There's 3 other things, side questy things that almost have to get done, but not necessarily. So they're still kind of like a one shot. Um, I wish that my players were further along because then I could just run one of those mods as a one shot.
So do you think though in next week's session you can get them far farther enough along to do that? No?
No,
Okay.
not even
Okay.
close.
And I asked that, well, for the obvious reason, right? Because then it would work out for you. But like case in point, and this is a spoiler alert, so a little bit. So spoiler alert to you, Julie. So
Take your headphones off.
no, this is spoiler alert to you,
Oh,
Julie. So don't metagame on this. But like
oh,
the whole Elven thing last night, there was a specific reason I was doing that. I needed to buy time for the party and that's like as far as I'll go in my description. But because that whole encounter, that whole evening last night, was not in the campaign, not in the module,
no,
but
no.
I kind of made it work, right? I kind of made it fit in. I dovetailed it in, um, but with purpose of creating a delay. That was my
Okay.
goal for the party was to create a delay.
Mhm.
So I did that. In game time, I killed a whole day, right?
Mhm.
Or might even turn out to be 2 or 3 days, depending how long you stay here, in that little village
Try to find a cleric.
as you've been offered to spend a little time there. So, I mean, that was my objective, and I was thinking about it as to where the party is, where they're going, what's going on. You got a guy that's blind, he's left behind. You guys are pressing forward. I'm thinking what that combat's going to be with the big bad guy. Are you guys really ready, or is it going to be like an automatic TPK?
Mhm.
So I'm trying to balance all that, and one of the things I needed to do was to create a delay because other stuff obviously ahead, right? So I'm trying to create a delay for that reason to allow you guys some more potential. And again,
Mhm.
I'm talking a little codex here, but um, I think it's clear enough, what I'm saying without really telling you what's going on, just to get a gist of what I'm saying, right? So you're creating a delay, but we're making it fit into the storyline. It's germane to the story, or I made it in such a way, but I'm still accomplishing what I need to accomplish for the party.
Mhm.
I don't know. That was a lot of running around there.
I still think that I can pull off the crazy bar one shot because I kind of did something similar when I ran the silly goblin one, where the party played as goblins trying to steal cozy items for a wintry bungalow for their boss. There was a tavern section, and in the tavern, a lot of shit happens. But there is a tavern in Barovia, you know, and the tavern has some characters inside of it. And there are characters who live in the town, and I could bring just town characters in. And maybe it's not as exciting as some kind of crazy fever dream where Strahd and his wives come in and burst the party wide open, but at least it could be something fun. And maybe it doesn't last 4 hours. Maybe it lasts 2.5 hours or 3 hours. But at least it was something silly. It was something fun. It was something on my birthday that everybody could chill out and enjoy because I was going to have it as an off week and decided not to.
Mm. Or for your birthday, as you say, or would you rather be a player?
D&D for my birthday. Have somebody else run a different camp or a different one shot.
Have someone else run a one shot, or um,
Take over someone else's character.
well, see the only and people do that, right? So, some tables do that, and I don't get that because to me that has metagaming written all over it. So if you come out from behind the screen and go sit at the table, say, "Hey man, give me your character sheet. I'll be you tonight." Then that player goes behind the screen, and now they have everything.
Everything.
Even if they don't prep, right, and they're flying by the seat of their pants, they're skimming through stuff because they don't know what's coming up, and maybe they skim, a couple pages ahead with anticipation, so they have 5 minutes worth of prep, and they look at it, and then what if you guys don't get to that, and
Oh,
th-
plot twist.
and then you switch back, and now that player knows that, and
Yeah, it has to be a one shot. I agree.
right,
I don't think I would make somebody be the DM in the main campaign. I would definitely run a one shot. If the DM needs a break, run a one shot.
or just actually take a break.
Or physically take a break. I
Yep,
don't think anyone would care. I
t
know a lot
take a
of
week
my
off.
players come from far distances. I think they would probably enjoy sitting at home, a night instead of coming all the way out to BFE game store and playing silly D&D with me. I know they probably love it. I know there are some players who probably really, really it's part of their whole week
Hmm.
and they anticipate it and they love coming to play. And it's getting them through whatever hard times they're getting through. But I know that some players drive a long distance and
So
would probably want to save the gas money.
what? I'm not going to say who, but what do you think is the longest distance that you have a player coming from?
Almost Petersburg.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's my farthest. And that player actually, it's D&D is important to them, and I know that they would definitely, and that's why they are continuing to make that distance because my table is important to them,
Yeah,
and
I'm
whether that
curious.
be
You can tell me off camera, but I'm really curious as to who that is that's going that distance. Off camera, off camera.
yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna deets, um, because there's actually more behind it, and that character actually opened up to me recently, and I actually found out something very surprising that I
Personal?
didn't know. Very personal, and I was like, "Holy crap!" And they're like, "Yeah, I've talked about it before," and I'm like, I'm not there 30 minutes before the game starts.
Well, I'm not interested. Well, I shouldn't say I'm not interested. I don't need to know their personal affairs. I'm just curious as to who's driving that far. That is kind of far.
I have two players who are very close to each other, and both are south of the river. I have one that's closer to Ironbridge, and I have one that's closer to Petersburg.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, Petersburg is the one that's far. Ironbridge is manageable depending where they are in Ironbridge, but Petersburg is far. All
like
right.
almost like Chester proper
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Ironbridge. Yeah,
And okay, so if that's the case, that's a little ways too.
yeah.
And,
But I
and
think they work close to here, so I
there you
think
go.
they get off work and they only have to drive but so far. I don't
Okay.
think they get off work way downtown in BFE Chester and have to drive all the way up to Ashland.
All right, I got you.
I don't think that's happening.
All right, so you mentioned a couple times tonight about random encounters. So,
That you hate.
well, no, I wouldn't say I hate them, but my question always is, do random encounters have to be random? Do you have to rely on the dice to tell you when there's a random encounter? I get it. By definition, it would be, but you know what I'm saying. And do you have to rely on the dice to tell you which on that table it's going to be?
I'm
So
50.
personally, while I will sometimes use dice to determine if there's a random encounter, the random encounter that it turns out to be often
It's planned.
is not very random.
Right.
I may consult the table and say I think at this point in time this is the one that's most applicable and the one that'll be most enjoyable,
I don't do that.
and not just roll and the
Well,
table says this and holy shit this random encounter makes no sense at all. And but if I choose this one instead, man, maybe the party's full strength and they're going to be way too strong for that the upcoming boss fight. Let's as an example. So this random encounter. Oh shit, we rolled it. Actually, is going to happen.
mhm,
So instead of me choosing the random social encounter, they need a random combat encounter to kind of knock them down a little bit, so that we have a little bit of balance, so to speak, right? A little later on,
mhm.
or vice versa. The party's in a rough shape, and while I don't avoid a TPK,
They won't survive a
you know I
TPK.
wouldn't avoid that for the sake of avoiding it. Um, but maybe the party's beat down instead of having a kicking ass combat
Combat
encounter,
encounter.
maybe a social encounter would be more fitting because they need this piece of information, and this will be an opportunity for them to get that in that social interaction. It's not to say they will, but the opportunity will be there.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't always use the random encounter tables in the truest form of relying on the dice to tell me which encounter it is. Sometimes I do,
Right.
but by the same token, sometimes I'll make my own random encounter table so it fits more
I made
accordingly.
my own.
Okay, so as an example, you and I dabbled a little bit, a couple one shots on the Keep on the Borderlands, right? Keep on the
Mhm,
Borderlands is set in the Caves of Chaos, so it's in a forested valley, right? Meadows down bottom, what have you. And I create my own random table for that. Like a bear, maybe some of the local bugbears, just a social encounter with a another adventuring party who's leaving. It's things like
mhm.
that versus just combat, 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 combat encounter, random encounter, combat, combat. So that way, when I create my own table, if there was that random encounter, I could definitely feel comfortable rolling against that table because
Right.
it's going to fit on this campaign for this party group.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I am 50-50 as well. There is a time and a place for a random encounter, and that's during filler. If there ain't nothing going on and you guys are just traveling down the road, instead of like iterating, you're traveling down the road. Um, maybe you throw in a random encounter to make it a little more interesting. But when I did Mines of Fandelver, and you weren't there for that one, but during Mines of Fandelver, they went up the King's Road, which is the big one that goes from Phandalin, well, not Phandalin, because Phandalin is an offshoot on the Tribord Trail. So you go on the Tribord Trail and you hit the King's Road. The King's Road goes all the way up to Neverwinter, and they were trying to go to the place where the dragon was, which is oh god, the destroyed city that's by the river. Thunder Tree, Thunder Tree. Thunder Tree is directly east down the river from Neverwinter. So the traveling party from Phandalin to almost Neverwinter, the river before Neverwinter, is where they were going to then turn directly to the east to go to Thunderbridge, Thunder Tree. Um, I did a 50-50 dice on combat versus social. And then on the 50-50 dice, if it was combat, it was combat. That's all it is. If it wasn't, it was social. And I got to pick some fun, stupid social encounter. Came across a couple drunks when they got close to the city. They found a lost, hurt dog. They found satyrs telling a joke contest, and the party had to vote on which joke was the funniest. And I got to look up D&D puns. It was great.
Oh,
They found
that sounds like a little bit of prep one in there.
thieves. Oh no, I pulled up a random encounter table on Pinterest. No prep, never. Uh, I would love it to have been prep, but um, they found some really bad thieves, and I pretended they were like Kronk from Emperor's New Groove, and I sung the like dum bum 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 bum, and one did like a barrel roll, and he failed the athletic save, and he tripped and fell. Um, I did like a group of knights traveling with a treasure trove down the road. Just a bunch of random social encounters instead of a bunch of combat encounters.
Now,
Um,
stuff like that too, all those random encounters, whether random or not, also can tie into pacing, right? Which I talked about earlier. Like I need to slow
Fill
Tuesday night,
time,
right? I
filler.
need I need to slow the party down. It wasn't just filler because like I had nothing from point A to point B, but mm, I had purpose as the DM. I need to slow the party down. So that what you're describing can do just that as well. You can kind of help control the pace of the
Yeah,
party.
they did a bunch of little tiny like side quests. They beat up some orcs and they beat up a banshee. No, they didn't beat her up. They questioned her. And then they talked to a necromancer. They did a bunch of little ones like bam, 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 like dun, dun, dun. And I was like, oh shit, that went really fast. So the last one was Thunder Tree, and Thunder Tree's large, and it was all those dilapidated buildings, and there's a fucking dragon, and then there's the cultists, and you have to deal with the cultists, and you were there for that one.
Hmm.
Um, so getting from point A to point B, I was like, okay, well, all of those little tiny side quests, they did nothing. They flew through that crap. Let's try and, you know, make it a little more interesting, is my thought process.
Right.
Um,
And that raises my question about random encounters. Like, what is the purpose of that? If they're truly that random, what function are they serving in the game?
there are travel mechanics for 5e, and they're apparently awful. I loosely follow them. A certain amount of distance in days. You can walk a certain pace, and your pace determines how long
Hmm.
it
Right,
takes.
right, right.
And I try to do like a morning encounter and then a camping nighttime encounter. The camping nighttime encounter, of course, is the watches where you have to do the 4 watches. So I try to do, and for Curse of Strahd has combat and non-combat encounters. There's a couple really funny ones that happen even in the spooky, scary castle, um, that you could potentially run into. There's a couple on the Slavic woods that are like creepy and like replay the whole "you are in a horror campaign.
But
This
all
is
right, but even
spooky."
with what you're describing, the travel, and
Spooky.
and travel is a whole other conversation, which we won't
Oh,
get
it's
into
awful.
tonight. But and you're right, and the D&D mechanics in every edition for travel is horrible.
It's
As a matter of
awful.
fact, some of them oftentimes one of the mechanics they offer is just skip it,
Oh,
and for some groups that's just fine because they're not interested in
oh,
that, right?
theater of the mind. Yeah,
But no, I'm just like skip it all together. Okay, you guys arrived at the next town. Skip
yeah.
it. But my question still stands, and you can answer or we can just food for thought. But you said when they were traveling, you did a morning encounter and then like maybe a nighttime encounter. And I'm hoping you made those random and not automatic every, morning and night. But nonetheless, what is the
Oh
function?
yeah, I made him random.
What
Yeah,
is the function of that? What purpose does that
filler,
serve? Exactly.
filler.
If it serves no purpose, then why have it? Why do it? And that's why my random encounters are not really all that random.
Yeah. From some of the roads from my mod have been adjusted because in the campaign, and I've explained this to my players, that in the campaign the map is actually a lot smaller than it looks. So I told them that I have a new map. I said, so don't be looking up maps because it's not the same map. Well, I told them not to look up a map anyway because
Well,
they're in a horror campaign.
Well,
They don't do
that's all the
that.
more reason. Let them look up the map and have the wrong map and have no idea what the hell's going to happen. That'll teach you for
I have
metagaming.
I told them, I said, my distances are different. I said, because the real map, you could walk 2 hours and be at another town. So story wise, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I told them, so I have an adjusted map. I said, the map is totally different in distance and travel. I said, you guys are going to be on the road a lot. I said, it's going to take a while to get from point A to
Mhm.
point B. And instead of describing, you were on the road for 8 hours, I feel like in somewhere as dangerous as where they are currently, a pocket dimension of otherworldly significance run by an evil overlord, I feel like his minions during an 8 hour trip would eventually try and get you. I feel like there's no way, especially if he's as like capable of seeing the party as he is. My players, I'll give a great example. My players last night got charmed into touching an orb, and the orb was in a statue of him, and he was holding the orb, and he charmed a player to touch it. And well, the orb charmed the player, not Strahd himself. But the orb gave my player this sense of being watched, and like shivers went down a couple other players' spines, and I said, "It feels like you're being watched, but you kind of like it." And my player's like, "Oh, it was my god," like, "Oh, I'm a cleric. My god's watching after me." But then the other two players realized who the statue was of and got really nervous. So I basically like hinted like now things are, maybe somebody's watching
All
you,
right, so but what you're describing though, what I'm hearing through all that is that your random encounters do have some sort of meaning. While the
They're
encounter
planned.
the
They're
encounter itself, it may be a combat, right,
planned.
may be meaningless other than, hey, the bad guy stumbled upon you, but at least it makes sense in what's going on in the campaign. But so often we see these random encounters are so flipping random, they make no
Random, yeah.
sense at all. At
You're playing an
all.
Egypt campaign and you get attacked by a
Yeah.
bullfrog, and you're like, bullfrogs don't exist in Egypt.
It does, so that's one of the, again, that's a whole other conversation, a whole other question we'll address on another night about random encounters. But the other day I asked you, and I'm going to change directions here for us a little bit.
Yeah.
The other day I asked you on Discord, I said, what makes for a good player? And I said, hold that thought. So you're holding that thought for now. So let's talk about what makes for a good player. What do you think makes for a good player?
I like players who are willing to role play. I like players who are willing to role play not themselves. I like players who like to step out of the box,
Mm-hmm.
um, and be something they're not. I think that's really fun, not only for them but for me, because I know this quiet, sultry character isn't my crazy badonkadonk friends giggling out of their seat every night. And for them to get into character and do that role play is really fun for me. I did theater when I was in high school a couple times, and I always really liked it. I did improv. I really like improv, so I really like to have that as a person who is a player who enjoys that. Of course, people are shy, and I don't expect that everybody, and I don't force everybody to role play. Um, but I do like my players who do.
No, but
I
but
like
but
players
to that point
who.
though, Julie, it's a role-playing game.
It is literally a role
It's
playing game.
That's the title, that's the concept here of the game. It's a
TTRPG.
RPG role-playing game. Now, what role-playing means to one person, I guess, can be slightly different to another, but what role-playing is, you are playing someone that is not you. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, sometimes in the workplace, we'll role play kind of as ourselves if it were kind of role playing a sales scenario or a what ifs kind of scenario. But that's because
Customer
you're role
service.
playing really yourself for a real life situation, right? This is a
Right.
fantasy role playing game, so you should not be role playing as yourself. It does not require acting, it does not require voices, but you can
No.
play as someone that's not like your personality. It's not all that
Right.
hard to do to say, hey, I'm going to be, my character is a rough and tough, fight them, punch first, ask questions later. Complete opposite of what I might be in real life. But that's not that hard to role play because it's all make believe, it's fake anyway. So just make shit up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, why not?
Right? Okay. So players who actually role play. Okay. What else do you think makes for a good player?
I like players who. Hmm, I like players who pay attention,
Hmm.
but I think that's every DM. I read the thing, and then sometimes, things happen, and then I'm like, oh yeah, you guys, that thing. And they're like, what thing? And I was like, I flavored you a thing 20 minutes ago. You guys don't remember the thing? And they're like, eh. And like half my party's like, yeah, I remember the thing. And then I have like 3 or 4 people who are like, thing? And I'm like, dang it. But it is 8 people. To get 8 people to like purely focus is probably statistically minimal. But I digress on that. Um, I like players who come prepared, although I don't mind helping someone if accidental things happen. I like players who bring their character sheets and I print the minis, so they should bring their gosh darn mini. I like players who have their own pretty dice, and know which dice are which. Although I don't mind helping a new player, but after a certain amount of time, you should know what a D4 is. Um, which we had that conversation on Tuesday
We did.
about a
Yep, yep, yep.
another
We, we,
player
we
that we
talked
know.
about that. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Um, but
so
I
I've
don't really mind players who don't know the rules. I don't mind that
no, no,
because
not at
I don't
all,
know
not
the
at all.
rules.
A few things for me, and you touched upon one, the second one. Well, I guess the third one, being prepared. So
Being prepared.
I understand, and again, I'm a 1E guy, right? And most of the people I'm playing with have never seen 1E before, or I'm their first exposure to it. But players' handbooks for 1E, I've made available to all my players, PDF, cloud storage, they can all access it. When we're in physical gameplay with each other in person, I have physical copies of the book, so they can review it then. Yeah, two copies. Um, so that's one of my issues is preparation. And what I mean for me, what I mean by preparation is know your character, know your race, know your abilities, your spells, whatever. Know that stuff.
Yeah, and it's one
You
thing to
know,
be like, I'm new, I've never played a barbarian, I don't know what
absolutely, that's
reckless
fine.
assault
But
is.
when we're 2 months
But
in and you still need to
oh,
look
what
up,
does that do again?
you still need to look up every single thing. Like you start
Yeah,
testing my patience a little bit. You really do. Um,
I'm a
because
little more patient than
because
you.
at that point we've played enough. You should have been thumbing through this already. Again, players need to prep too. It's that
Yeah,
simple. All that prep does not lie on the DM alone. There's plenty enough for the DM to do. I can only hold your hand but so long, right? And
yeah,
at that point, at a certain point, and each DM has a different tolerance, right, as to 2 weeks time, 2 months time, 2 year, whatever it is. But it comes a point where you need to know your character, your race, your class, what spells or what your spells do without having to look it up every friggin' time. You should have at least a broad sense of what that spell does. I may not know the
right.
specific of it, or what is the range on it, how long does it last, but I should know what that spell does, right? And
Yeah.
after a handful of times
The
of
damage
casting
dice.
this spell, after a handful of times of therefore looking it up, perhaps I've taken notes on my sheet of the casting time or the distance or whatever. So I have a quick reference on the back of my character sheet so I
Yeah.
don't have to start thumbing through 50 pages of the book in that section to find what that spell does and slow everyone down.
For 5e, when you do a weapon damage, not to hit, but the damage. Um, no, to hit as well. So when you hit with an item, it does the your proficiency bonus and the ability modifier that you're using it with. So if it's a strength weapon, you do your strength stat and your proficiency bonus. On your character sheet, it is usually pre-added, so you can just have the math right there. So it's dice. I rolled the dice. Okay, I hit. Okay, what's the damage? Or what's the hit modifier? Oh, it's I rolled an 8 modifier, and they never some I even have some players who still don't modifier and they're new. So I don't mind. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm like plus, 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 plus and they sometimes they miss it. But
I
the
can't
same with
tell
the
you,
damage dice.
yeah, I can't tell you how many
2d8
times that
plus
happens.
1, 2d8 plus 3.
And
It's written on your paper.
and you know what happens on Friday night when I'm DMing that table? They forget something. Well, guess what? And this is not like to be mean, but like I forgot too. Like I can't remind you, I'm not going to remind you every single time of every single thing, because that's going to slow our overall pace down, right? I'd rather have the player miss or overlook their +1 to hit versus us spending 20 seconds to look it up to figure it out. Okay, now I actually rolled a 14 instead of a 13. No, sorry, okay, in fact, you rolled a 13. You missed that modifier. It's not the end of the world. You didn't die. It'll be okay. But you're absolutely right. But I'm not going to be reminding everyone all the time. I have my own shit to keep track of, and I can only do that by so much. And if we forget it, we forget it. Like to that point, though, I remember was playing. I have like a DM, a PC. Not really. Just I was filling in for a player, and they were
Mhm.
paladin. And a paladin, by their mere presence, they emanate protection from evil around them, and
Yeah, like an aura.
that means the bad guy gets -2 to hit,
Mhm.
modifies their roll, right? I forget that shit all the time. No, and even when the player is there, they forget that all the time. Like if you don't remind
Well,
me,
and isn't that player new?
relatively, but she's played that class before. But we all kind of get enthralled in the game itself sometimes, and we forget some of these smaller nuances. But
Action.
but
Action.
like it's not my responsibility to remember every character's abilities. That's
No,
why
it's
we
too
have
much.
players. It's their
Yep.
responsibility to know their
To know
one
their
character
character.
and remind me as the DM from time to time, hey, don't forget, I emanate protection from evil, so the bad guys get -2 to hit. Oh, great, thanks for the reminder. Because I forget that all the
Chase and
time.
Corey, Chase and Corey are both really good, like at disadvantage, or they're like at they'll say they'll tell me all these weird little things, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Or they'll be like, hey, don't forget your thing, and then the player's like, oh okay, I forgot about that. But again, I have a couple newer players, so for Corey and Chase to also step in and be like, you know it really helps me because I forget, my little squirrel brain forgets as well.
Now, to
um
be fair though, the DM should learn that over time as well. As
Eventually,
the players
yeah.
keep reminding me that hey, the paladin
You'll
emanates
eventually
protection from evil,
remember.
then I should remember that over time as well. One of the things I've encouraged my players to do online and in person to this exact point is when you roll your d20, let's say we're learning, we're new, you roll your d20, right? I rolled a 17. And I want to ask you, okay, what modifiers do you have? Do you have racial modifiers, strength modifiers? So I asked them to call it out. I rolled a 17. I'm an elf with a long sword, so I get +1 to hit. That's 18. I'm really strong, so I get another +1 to hit. That's a 19. And you
Hmm.
say that enough times, not only does it
You'll
drill it
eventually
into that
remember.
player's brain, everyone else might start to remember some of that. So if you miss it as the player, the other players can chime in and say, hey, don't forget that. Did you forget that?
Yeah, I have a couple players who do that already.
So if you call,
But that's because Corey and Chase are veterans.
if you but
They're
yeah
big boys.
if you call that out loud, especially for new players, it helps to kind of for them to remember that mechanics through
Right, right,
repetition. Yeah,
right.
so
Definitely.
so player preparation is kind of a big thing for me. Like you got to know, like you said, I'm not expecting you to know all the rules. I don't know all the rules. I'm not expecting you to know really any of the mechanics. That's what the DM is here for, to kind of guide you through the game in that aspect, right? Well, many, but that's one of their responsibilities to kind of guide you through that. If the players know it, that's great, but you got to know your character. You have one character to learn. You chose that character. You created that character. Take a few,
Backstory and all.
take a few minutes to learn it. 10 minutes before every game session. Just break out the character sheet, skim over it again, look at these
Well, and
things, and players don't do
your
that.
characters might not have, minus Artie, because Artie is the backstory king. Minus Artie, your players might not have extensive backstories, but almost all of my players, because we did that session 0 thing and I gave them all phobias and a secret, they all have very extensive backstories. So if you put the time to make a one-page backstory on this character that you created, I should hope that you're putting that much determination into learning the mechanics
That's an
of
excellent
this
point.
beautiful backstoried character that you invented and are living embodying. You should know all of their physical
Yep.
characteristics as well as their emotional background
I could not
characteristics.
agree more. I would even press that further to say learning the front side of that character sheet is more important than learning the back side of the story. Because the front side
Right?
with all the numbers, that affects your gameplay much more significantly than that backstory does.
Well, the backstory is fun.
Well, yeah, I do. I get it. Like it's fun, and it helps kind of it kind of influences you.
Ooh,
It
math.
influences your role play. But as you said, you have some players who don't role play because they're not comfortable with that.
I have.
So if they're not
Mm,
going to role play their backstory, then friggin' focus on the front of the sheet, all your numbers, what you can
maybe,
and can't do.
maybe two, maybe. But really, my whole table role plays very well. Very, very well. They role play a lot better than like when I role played. I mean, when I DM'd my son and his friend, my son and his friend were like quiet as crickets. They were like, and I was almost like, this is really awkward. I forgot about players who don't role play because my table is so into the role play, and I can't wait to get out of this stupid house to actually get to some role play because I feel like all of the combat. But that's the campaign. I mean, not the campaign, the chapter that we're in is all combat. And I had to tell that because I had a player and they were like, why is all this combat happening? I could sense that it was dragging them down. And I had to like sidebar, and I didn't tell the whole partied this, but I said, don't worry. I said, this is just where you're at. I said, it'll get better. I promise. I said, I know it's a slog right now. I know we're slogging through this weird no initiative combat. I know random encounters suck. I said, I know you're getting beat up and you're not used to getting beat up. I said, it's going to get better. I said, role play is coming. Don't worry about it.
So I mean, another thing for me too. Again, prepared is the first thing. Another thing for me, very broadly, would be cheating, right? But specifically metagaming.
Oh, metagaming.
Metagaming, as you know,
I
that's a big thing for me. That's a
I
big
get
thing for me.
excited and I accidentally metagame. I don't do it intentionally. I did it a little bit on Tuesday
With
where
what?
I if it where like you were like, oh, children giggling, and I would like interject and be like, oh, it's fairies, ew, fairies, or
Well, no, but no. See,
I
I want
said
to say that that's
there's another thing
metagaming
I
because
did.
you didn't know what it was. If Julie knew what that giggling was in the woods and said, "Oh, it's fairies," and it was in fact fairies because Julie knew that, then that would be metagaming because you would have been sharing Julie's
Uh,
knowledge with the rest of the party. But it wasn't
I get really
fairies,
excited, and I
you know.
use my knowledge a lot, and not character's knowledge, Chandrell's knowledge. Chandrell's knowledge is not Julie's knowledge,
Correct.
you know? Um, and I think I might have even I think I accidentally did it when we were doing something else and I said something and then I was like, Chandra wouldn't know that. I shouldn't say that out loud with my mouth. And I was like, he's gonna hate me.
Well,
I know you don't, but
and
you know what I mean. I was like,
but
I
there are
shouldn't have done
times though,
that.
and that's where if it's a social aspect, right, and that's really what you're referring to here, I think. But the DM can has an opportunity to kind of correct that and call out the player in a very polite and indirect way, because if it's a social interaction and
He would say,
Chandrell,
hey, Chandrell doesn't know that,
well,
and I've done
and you
that
can be very
before.
direct. I've done that before
Oh,
as
you
well.
guys don't know that.
Right. Or the NPC they're talking to calls out the character and says, "Oh, what is it? Whatever is it that you mean? I haven't heard that before." Or how is it that you know of this? And that way the character opened up a can of worms perhaps that they can't answer and explain now.
I've done that before too, and then I start to explain it, and then I'm like, wait, Chandrell doesn't know that. Hold on, sorry, excuse me, I'm gonna leave. Julie has left the chat, because I get so excited, and mine's not malicious. I don't maliciously metagame. I just get really excited
Right.
with mystery
And
and intrigue.
and that's one
I
thing.
get so curious.
And that's one thing. And while I have issue with metagaming across the board, so I have an issue with that, but it's this much of an issue, right? What I have a bigger issue with is when
Intentional malicious
right, which
metagaming.
is what you're describing earlier. Oh, my players don't look up the map. What the fudge? Why are you looking up a map to begin with? Right?
I don't think they do. They're
But
very against
but
spoilers.
but
They don't want to be spoiled.
but that is an example of what metagaming would be, right? And I
Correct.
have huge issue with that, right? Or if they hop on, it's 2025, the power of the internet, right? The internet did
Oh
not
no.
exist
Reddit.
when 1E rolled out, right? It did not exist.
Reddit's even
The
worse. There's a
internet did
whole
not
Curse of
exist.
Strahd
So
Reddit.
for most of you who'll be watching this, you grew up with the
Don't
internet. Okay,
Google
the
anything.
internet did not exist when I was a child and did not exist when
D&Ding.
1E first came out. So you couldn't look up anything. Okay, but
Mm-mm.
now you can look up everything, and I thank the internet for that because I have a lot of PDFs as a result. But um, it makes it really easy for players to go online and find a copy of Curse of Strahd, or a Reddit post, or a forum, or whatever on Curse of Strahd and read all about it.
Yeah.
That's
Mine are
that's effing
intentionally not doing
metagaming.
it.
So
Yeah, they're not doing it on purpose.
that's
They
one of
want to be they want to be embroiled in it. They actually genuinely, and I'm really appreciative of my players for that reason. They I don't have anybody at my table like that. And I am so happy I don't have anyone toxic like that
and
at my table.
and that's why I always make sure I tweak a little bit here, a little bit there in my campaigns. Not again like you, not that I have any reason to think any of my players are metagaming. I don't think they would, and I have no reason to think that they are based upon when we play. But I always change things up a little bit. Um, and to that point though, I think you have a little bit of metagaming more than you think. And my example is this: some of your players have played for a little while, and they know either through playing or reading the monster manual, which I don't think players should do. That right there screams metagaming. They know that this monster, this ghost, this white, this this bugbear, whatever, has a certain number of hit dice and a certain number of hit points, right?
Yeah,
And
they
it's
try
the
not
first
to.
time their characters know that. First time that their character encounters this creature, but the player knows all about it, and they've inflicted whatever 30 points of hit points of damage. And man, holy
Yeah.
shit, that guy should be dead right now. Julie, is that right? We haven't killed him yet, dude. What the fudge? No. So
They have caught me on that a couple times where they've dealt like 30 points of damage and they're like, "Are you sure this ghoul isn't dead?" And I'm like, I actually genuinely forget to count. So with no initiative combat, and this is kind of a sidebar to no initiative combat, I kind of forget at the top of a round to do the math. Um, I keep track of the damage as the turn goes, and then at the top of the round, I do the calculative math to see if the monster dies or has a turn. And sometimes I get really embroiled in the or excited for the combat, and I'm like, next round, next round, and then I forget that the monster was dead last round. You know,
all right, so
because I got excited because that's a me thing,
I'll
and I should
I'll engage
probably
you here
keep
briefly on the
track
sidebar.
of the
Yes,
health as I go
yes,
instead of keeping the damage
yes,
and then calculating the
yes.
damage.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So the bad guy
My hamster
has 30
brain.
hit points. The first guy lands a blow
I
for
want it
5. You
back.
need to mark that down to 25. Next guy hits for 3, mark it
Correct.
down to 22, and not wait to
I know
tabulate.
it's a
Be,
habit.
because what's going to happen is then that's going to slow down. Okay, so if you do it while it's happening, then the amount of time it takes you
It
to do that
stays
math
fast.
is seamless. It takes no time. But if you wait till the end, and I know you
I have a
with your
calculator.
math, like you said, you don't math, then you got to
I have a calculator.
sit there with the calculator and key it all in, and that slows down the speed of the no initiative combat, which is intended to be fast paced, kind of stressful, intense, and you just kind of pulled it back a little bit, and then you speed up because now it's there, and then you pull it back as you do all these calculations. So that's all I'm going to say for that sidebar. But getting back to
Yeah.
the whole metagaming thing, that's a big no-no
I
for
think
me. And a simple
when
way
Jules
the
did it
players
that
do that.
that one
Oh
time,
my God. Oh my God. Yep.
he did it that one time. I think sadly he learned his lesson, and I don't think you were the only one who had brought it up. I think other players did. I wasn't there for it. I was there after I came in. But since then, he is now playing a quieter character, a character that actually can't speak common. He can only mimic common. He's a kenku. So
Okay.
he can only a kenku is a type of like crow, crow or raven, and they can like a mockingbird. They can mimic sounds they've heard.
Hmm.
So it's really funny. He does a lot of comedic effect shit. It's really hilarious. Corey has a quirk that says that he pretends to know a language that no one else does, but he actually doesn't know it at all. So Corey will interpret what um, Jules like says in bird language, and it's really funny. Um, comma ever since then, he doesn't even for the rest of that campaign, I don't think he did it. He stayed pretty true to the rule of you have to roll for it. You don't know crap. You have to roll for it. He hasn't brought out a book since. He brings all his stuff with him because he comes from school, I think, or his
I
sister
think,
drops him
yeah,
off
something like
after
that.
school.
Yeah.
He hasn't pulled out a manual since, and I think it definitely put him into a different perspective. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it. It probably put him into a different perspective, a little bit of a life learning lesson about how awful metagaming can be, and I don't think he wants to be that person because he's not. He's not that person. He just really likes. He's a DM, and he really likes to DM and makes his own stories and stuff like that. But there's a time and a place for that, and I think he's learned it. Um, and I think he's become a better player for it necessarily because
You know,
he isn't as crazy as he was this campaign
so
as he was last
staying with
campaign.
metagaming, that is another example of how
I don't think it was
no,
intentional. He
but
also wasn't malicious.
no. Well,
No,
I could argue that, but being a player and a DM just
we love you, Jules. I'm
just
sorry.
just opens you up to metagaming. Now, if you have a mature, I'm not talking the person, but if you have a mature player that understands what metagaming is and can set aside their knowledge from the
Yeah,
DM when they're the player, you're fine.
yeah,
And I think you have a couple players. You have a few players I'm not familiar with at all, but you have a couple players that I'm familiar with that I would say are relatively mature as a player, at least like an
Good
adolescent
at
as a player,
separating the
right?
two.
And know what metagaming is, know when they might be metagaming or someone is, that kind of thing, and know what role play is. Definition of maturity. Um, but again, DM and player playing both those roles can be very. It's walking a thin line. Okay.
You have to be
Now,
careful.
right now, as an example of that level of awareness, one of the first sessions, one of the first games I sat on with you as the DM playing 5e. I've never played 5e before, first time with Julie. And something came up, and they're like, oh, well, aren't you going to do this? No, my character doesn't know what the freak a dragon does or how powerful it is. I don't know that. My character doesn't know that. So, yeah, I'm going to go up to the tower and talk to the dragon. Something to that effect. I don't remember exactly what it was, something to that effect. Like, oh my God, why are you going? My character doesn't know about a dragon. It was just that.
Yeah.
I know as the player, I know
Me Keith knows,
as
but
the
me
DM, I know,
Corvalor
but
doesn't
my
know.
character did not. So I role played what my character would do, which would be
And they're pretty good
go
about
up
that.
about that.
They're pretty good about what would my character do versus what would me as a player do. Maybe not always, because of course I do have, again, newer players, but there are players who are like me. Me player would definitely do something different, but me character is not going to do that, and this is what I'm going to do. I've had a couple of times where they're like, me, no, character, yes.
Right. And so that falls on the scope of player maturity, right? Being able to differentiate themselves as a player
I've done it
and,
myself
and their
too.
role play character. Now, when you role play as yourself, that makes it all the more difficult to differentiate that knowledge between
On
player and
my
character. And that's why it's all the more important to play a character that's not identical to you.
on my every other Saturday campaign, I accidentally made my character slightly unintelligent. She has an 8 in intelligence, which for D&D 10 is average, so she's slightly below average. She's a little stupid. And it's hard for me sometimes to be like, "Oh, Fenwise is stupid. She would definitely do the stupid thing and not the smart thing that Julie would want to do." And so I have intentionally lobbed myself into traps, into doors that are traps, into monsters because my character would, because she's a dum dum, and it's just what she would do. She's a dum dum asshole, and she would do it because she wanted to, and not because it's the smart thing to do, because she wouldn't think about that.
And a good example of that, I'm not sure if you were there for this or not. When we were doing the Keeping the Borderlands one shot or two shot, one of the new players had a character who had a relatively low intelligence, and he's there in the subterranean dungeon cave,
Yes, I was there for that.
and he starts breaking out spikes and hammer and start ding 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 trying to set
Yes, yes, that was me.
tr-
I was there for that.
trying to set a trap. And of course
It
he,
was
yeah, so he as the player knew better, but he said, "Man,
yeah.
my character's not too smart. This sounds like a good idea for him," and he role
And
played
we
it
were all
out.
like,
Oh yeah,
"No!" And he
he's
was
like,
like,
"Nope,
"Well, I'm
ding
dumb." And
ding."
we were
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, you're right. You're
So
dumb."
so that is a good example of role playing your character and differentiating between you as the player and you as the character, right? But
Right.
kind of coming full circle. So a big thing for me is the preparation. Don't freaking metagame. Um,
No, it's
uh,
not fun. It ruins it.
Right, and like I don't understand why is this type of game
And it ruins it for other
a
people.
role playing game? It's not a competition. There's no winning. There's no losing. You're not
No.
going to beat anyone.
No.
So I don't see
Right.
why you would do it. It doesn't really benefit you. That actually steals from you, steals from the experience of you and those around you. It really does.
That's the same with min-maxers.
Yep. Yep.
People who min-max their
Oh my
character
God.
and learn all these crazy combos and
No
and
bullshit.
things. You see it on stupid social media all the time, and the players like, I can beat your big boss with just 2 spells. And the DM's like, "Cool, show me." And then they give you the full breakdown, and I'm like, "Why would you do that?" Some random party in the middle of BFE somewhere having a nice competition, I mean a nice campaign, saw that Instagram post and now is going to launch it on their DM unexpectedly thinking it's funny from Instagram, and it's not, and the DM gets blindsided by it and can't do anything about it. Just because you can break the game doesn't mean you shouldn't. That's my rule number one. And even my players are like, "Julie, we know that's your rule number one. We won't do it." And they're like, "Can I do XYZ 1, 2, 3 ABD?" And I'm like, "Don't break my game." And I say it so much, it's my rule number one. Rule number one: don't break my game. Don't do it. Because I have some 2024 players in my 2014 5e game. And I'm like, cool, 2024 Dungeons and Dragons crazy shit. Don't break my game. Because I don't know if Chris Estrada can handle 2024 Dungeons and Dragons yet. It could totally break. I don't fucking know. Don't do it. Don't do it.
All right. How did we start on this? Because I had a thought and then I lost it because I'm old and I
Min
forget things.
maxers,
Oh yeah, yeah. Thank you, thank you. So,
awful. Don't do it.
no, no, no. I think. Well, first of all, it's much harder to do that in 1E because the dice tell you psh, what character, essentially what character you're going to be, what class you're going to be, or it narrows
And
down
I
the options,
kind of like
and you
that.
can't modify your numbers thereafter really
I
in
kind of
any
like
way.
that a lot.
But
It's not fun for role play, but it's fun as a game mechanic.
so, well, see, I disagree. I think it's really fun for role play because it's much more interesting to play a character, as you described, that has like a disability,
Didn't
a
expect.
lower intelligence or lower strength, or one that's super strong but dumb as rocks, right? To to role play,
That's quintessential. That's cliche.
well, it is, but pick whatever. But to role play that seemingly bad character makes all the more fun. When you have the thief with a low dexterity or barely made the criteria to be a thief, so he makes all kinds of noise when he's walking around and he's trying to be silent because he sucks at that aspect of being a thief, right? But he's got to try because he's a thief and that's what a thief does. So, role playing that stuff out, um, I think makes the game all the more interesting. Instead of saying, oh, well, I'm a thief and I make a lot of noise, so I'm not going to do that skill ever. No, a thief wouldn't do that. A thief's still going to try on here and there to do that because that's what the job needs right now for that thief
We have to
to
do
do that.
in
And you role play that out, and it's funny because he makes an ass out of himself, or reveals the whole party's location, or whatever it is.
me. On my every other Saturday campaign, back to Fenwise, my idiot. She's a rogue halfling. She's an idiot, and because we're in this dungeon with all these trap doors and trapped chests, I have thieves' tools and I have really good decks, and I can bust down all of the traps I want. Can I find them? No, I can't. And so I roll investigation and I suck ass at it, and I'm like, I don't see shit, and then I walk away because I didn't see it, and it's so funny, and I almost stopped doing it. I almost stopped being like, no, I'm first at the door. I check for traps because I know I'm gonna fail every single time, but it's almost funnier and it's almost better storytelling for my dum dum to go up to the door and search for traps
And
every single
and
time.
this is one of the times while I will use the overused, misused expression. Well, that's what my character would do. This is probably one of those times when it really would apply.
Yeah. And there is sometimes where it's annoying, where it's like, oh, my character's a bully, oh, my character's this big angry bully, but he secretly has a gold heart, and then he sits there and bullies the entire table. I had a player do that once. I had a player who, the character sheet, it was a one shot, and the character sheet that they picked, he was the
Mhm.
big dumb,
Yeah,
the big
I
dumb
think I
boy,
know what you might be talking about.
and he bullied, he role played, but he didn't role play in a way that made it seem like he was role playing. And one of my players was like, dude, why are you being so mean, stop. And he's like, oh, it's just what it says on my character sheet. And then finally we were all like, oh, ha 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 ha. But at first everyone was like, what are you doing, why are you being so mean, stop. um and we didn't realize he was doing the thing he was doing. Oh, that's what my character would do. Oh, my character's this big mean bully. And then he talks shit to the whole party, and then the whole party's like, we don't like you anymore, go away. You know?
But
James kind of did that on session 1. He tried to make crying children smile, which was a nice thought, but it wasn't the time or the place, and the whole party was like, we don't like this person, who are you?
thank you, Nee. Um, so last thing I'll say about metagaming. Um, again,
Min-maxing,
yeah,
metagaming, all
yeah.
that
Again,
crap.
obviously, it's more of a
Don't do it.
how to be a bad player versus being a good player. But if you don't do these bad things, you're probably going to be a good player. Um, you gave the example, a specific example earlier, and I'm not going to use names, but in reference to the same one you spoke about, and tying into that's what my character would do. That player um, was still relatively new, if I remember correctly, but he would come up with a justification so that he could open the book to look some. Oh, my character, collects books, so I'm gonna open up the
Well,
DMG and
no,
just look
that's
stuff
two.
up or something.
No, that's two different ones. My the mean one
Oh
is a
no 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 yeah
DM.
yeah no 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 yeah, I know two different ones. But
Two different ones.
earlier we were talking about early on when we were talking about metagaming, when we were talking about that knowledge and this.
Oh, I don't think that. I don't think it's intentional. I think that was sadly partially due to age. I think
Well,
that's just a dirty thing.
inexperience, right? Inexperienced or immature player,
Yeah,
yeah. But
I don't think it was
no, no, no,
malicious. I don't think it
no.
was.
And I don't think it was either. But
I'm gonna cheat at this game.
I'm just using it as an example of metagaming, right?
Oh,
So that
oh,
player, again, while unintentional or unknowingly,
right,
was coming up
right,
with justification or excuses as to why his character would know this, so that the player could then open up the book, the DMG, or the monster manual, or whatever it was, and just read through. Oh, my character would know that because of this, you know.
right.
And
And it,
I
they
have
are
issues with
fun,
that.
and they're a good read, but there's a time and a place,
Right.
and there are definitely players. I could have a worse table. I
Oh,
could. There are
absolutely.
definitely
Listen,
players
you,
out there who are just so toxic and awful. There are couples who go and play, and me and Wesley play on our Saturday campaign, and Wesley usually just falls asleep, and I play as Wesley's character, which isn't great. It's not good, but he Wesley works really hard, and he comes after work, so he's a dirty boy. And one of my friends even brought him a snack cup, so he has a special dirty boy snack cup, so he doesn't get grease all over the popcorn. Anyway, comma. Um, there are some couples who the the one person in the couple is the DM, and the other person who is in the couple is a player. And the couples, like the DM favors their
uh,
partner.
that's a whole other thing about bad DMs. That's not a player issue. That's a DM issue.
Right,
Yeah.
but it's so toxic, and
Yeah.
there could be. I could have worse players. I could have players who metagame way worse. I could have players who are impatient. I could have way worse options. And I am so
I could not
thankful
agree with
and
you more.
so grateful that I have
As
such
a
a
whole, you have
close
a good
knit
table.
table.
Yes, you have a good
Oh yeah,
table.
I love
You
them.
do. You do. As much as we might be talking about them, it's only because we only have but so many examples to provide to each other here. Um, but no, you do. You have a good table. You do have a good table. So,
Sorry, my child wanted to tell me the lasagna was done.
um, I wouldn't say this makes for a bad play, but a pet peeve of mine is when the players tell me that they should roll for something or say, "Oh, can I roll for this? Can I roll for that?"
Oh, I like that.
No,
No, I like
no. But
I like
my
that.
answer to that is always no.
I like it.
The player,
I like
no,
it.
it's not the player's place to ask the DM. It's the player's place to tell the player what their character is doing or wants to do, and then the DM adjudicates that and will tell you if you need to roll or what you need to roll. Go ahead.
So, 1E versus 5E, of course, is all the stupid dice that you hate.
Yes.
I like it, and this is my quid pro quo to your
Move you a little closer.
argument. Oh, I'm too far
There you
away.
go. That's much
I'm
better.
here now. I'm way louder. My quid pro quo to your argument.
Yes.
My other side of the story. My 5E interjection. Is when my characters say, "Oh, I want to roll. Hey, do you want me to roll a persuasion check?" It doesn't happen often, but sometimes it does. It gives me an opportunity to do some silly role play shit. It gives me an opportunity to be like, "I have an idea," and I do something stupid, and I'm like, "Yeah, give me a persuasion," and they give me some persuasion roll, and then it gives me that opportunity to add that like flavor, and then they fuck up or they miss the roll, they critical fail the roll, and I'm like, so this is what happens, and then they regret asking me to to do the roll, or it's the other way around and they get like a critical success, and I'm like, okay, here is the deal. and I tell them how there's an echo, how awesome they did, and I get to do this great flavor explanation. Again, it doesn't happen often, and it actually happens the opposite way around, where they tell me this great role play and they foreshadow all this beautiful like uh like soliloquy. They give me this great theatrical performance, and I'm like, great, roll for it. And then they fail. It's so funny. I love it.
So,
It's so funny.
all right. So you said we're getting an echo again.
It's on me. I can hear myself.
Okay, well, I cannot hear the echo.
Okay, good, good, good. Then it's me.
Okay, am I echoing for you or just you?
No, it was just me.
Okay. All right. So the most recent example I can give you is, and again, 1E is a little different than 5E. In 1E,
It
you're
is.
you're you're truer to the role play. You're not rolling to determine this or determine that. I have embraced a little bit of 5E influence, if you will, because I have a lot of 5E players who I'll say, okay, make a strength check, make a charisma check, this and that. But I've done that enough that the other night, last week, whatever, um, I was playing with the girls and they were in a social interaction in the tavern or whatever it was, and we're dialoguing back and forth, and the player didn't really like the response she got from the NPC. She was, I don't even know what it was, trying to convince him of something, whatever it was. And she said, "Well, can I make a charisma check?" I said, "No."
It's
It
just
was
what he
just
said.
that's what he said. Like the answer is no. This is the way it's playing out. It's like I'm playing as the character. You're not going to influence him. Just cut and dry. No. Okay. In
I
part,
will say,
in part, not because I was being mean, but like in part because you asked me. If I thought that was the place to make a charisma check, I would have told you make me a charisma check.
spite,
Make a spite.
petty.
Make it. But again, going back to what I said a minute ago, the player tells the DM what the character is going to do or is doing, would like to do, and the DM will then tell you what role or roles you need to make to adjudicate
Right,
your actions. When you say,
right.
"Can I make a charisma check?" No. "Can I make a strength
No.
check to see if I can do?" No. I just told you what happened. We already adjudicated that. Now you're trying to come back and do an instant replay. No. There's
I
no
will
there's no
say,
VAR. There's no video review. It doesn't work like that. So
you are quite twisty in roleplay sometimes, and you'll say stuff, and then somebody will say something back, and then you'll retort back with an even better twist to turn it back on themselves. Oh, it happens all the time on Tuesday, and I'll say something, and you'll use it right against me, and I'm like, no, that's not what I meant.
so
Stop
um,
it.
I had another
I
example
can
in
see
there for a
that
second.
player was probably frustrated, but
I
because her
think I
twist.
think in the moment she was because again, she wasn't getting the answer that she or the results that she was hoping for, but it doesn't always
Right.
happen. Oh, so no instant replay. Hang on, what's my thought in there? Shit, I don't know. I lost my thought. Oh no, that's what
That
it
she
was.
couldn't
Okay,
roll
so
back for it.
coming back to, I'll link that all the way to what is a DM? What makes for a good DM? What makes for a bad DM? Right? What is the role of the DM?
Mhm.
In short, the GM and I've said this to you numerous times, right? There's a whole list of adjectives to describe what the DM does, right? The DM is the adjudicator, the referee, the coach, the manager, the encourager, the whole list, right? But
Mhm.
if I'm playing soccer, football, baseball, whatever, the ref makes a call, it's the ref's call. There are good calls, there are bad calls. There are good no calls,
They're good
there are good,
referees.
there are
They're
bad
bad
no calls,
referees.
right? It happens, it's part of the game. So even if I was wrong, you didn't like my decision,
Wrong.
it happens, right? It's part of the game. Just the same, the ref made the call that no, you're not going to make a charisma check. That's it. Now she didn't challenge me on it, say, well, why not, or anything like that. She asked, I said no, but she didn't. I don't think she really liked my answer that I said no. But the moral of the story is the DM is making the call. He's the referee, and you have to be respectful, of that. And part of the ways you're being
I need to get.
respectful is not question the DM, question the referee. Hey, man, are you going to make that call? No,
I need to get better about that. I
no.
need to be a little more stoic. I'm a little loose right now. But that's because I'm still pretty new to being not only a DM, but also an actual player. I haven't actually played very much. My playing hours are probably less than my Dungeon Master hours. Probably DM way more than I've ever played.
So
Ever.
Artie and I were talking about that, and obviously I think for the most part here we're done talking about what makes for a good player because we're definitely going, we changed our direction here very organically. But Artie and I were talking about the other day on Discord, um, relating to someone else that we know who's DMing, and the question was like how do you how when should you become a DM? And my answer to him
We
and
talked about that on
to everyone,
Tuesday
right?
too.
Yeah, right. We touched upon that last night. That if there's no chance or no opportunity for the DM to be a player first, then it is what it is, right? If you have your family or you got five friends or whatever, you say, hey, let's all play Dungeons and Dragons, and no one knows what they're doing, no one's ever played before, then someone's going to stand up and say, okay, well, I guess I'll be the DM, I'll figure it out, right? That
Yeah.
aside, short of that, when there's opportunities to be a player first, you need to be a player first. It's a complicated game. There are volumes of rules, right? Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, DMG, and all these other all these other volumes, supplementary volumes. So it's truly textbooks, hundreds of pages on how to play this,
Pashas,
on how to
some
play
Santa
this game,
cards.
right? Even if you go back to 1E and you look at basic and expert, you're still talking 50 to 100 pages each off the top of my head.
Mhm.
So that's a good amount to kind of comb over and get a handle of. So be a player first. So how long to be a player first? Well, I don't think there's a real formula. I don't have a formula. But my thought was you need to be
I would
playing
say one full campaign.
you need to be playing role-playing games for at least 6 months, maybe even two up to 2 years. To be playing
Oh, that'd
role-playing
be
games or be playing D&D. You need to be doing it for a while, is the point.
two campaigns.
And then within the specific edition or version you want to play, you need to be there for several months as a player. A good 6 months, I would say, as a player. Because then at that point, you've learned enough of the mechanics, or at least become familiar enough with the mechanics, what role playing is, how to role play, that at that point, maybe you can step behind the screen and play. Now, then, of course, there's a question of, well, we only play once a month. Well, that changes that, right, in terms of time. So now you have to consider how many hours of playing do you
Instead of
have, right?
days.
Instead of
Yeah.
days or sessions. Because I think hours would be a better measurement than sessions or time. So, times in terms of chronology, months or years. So I would say at least 100, 200 hours of play
I
because
think.
if you do a year weekly and you play for 3 hours, that's 150 hours,
Yeah.
right? Give or take, because you miss a session here and there. So that playing for a year, yeah, maybe 150 hours, you starting to get a pretty good grasp of things to step behind the screen. So you need at least 100, 200 hours, I think, before you step behind the screen.
I did not get that. That
So
wasn't me. Not me. Definitely way, way, way. Gabe's campaign, ooh goodness, was also every other Saturday. That was my second time being a player when I started his campaign. His campaign lasted. We're on hiatus right now. We started Mark's campaign, which is the one we're playing right now, which he is like a homebrew, but it's third edition inspired. Mark really likes third edition. Why? I don't know. But he really likes third edition. So he's pulled a lot of monsters from third edition. He's pulled a lot of resources from third edition. He's pulled a lot of magical items from third edition. And he's like integrated it into we're playing 2024 Dungeons and Dragons, which is the new hotness. So I am getting um, a relative experience on the new hotness. But I think we played Gabe's campaign for close to a year. And then I played this weird campaign that was also homebrew that was written like by a writer. He did writing on his spare time. And I did it at 12 o'clock to 5 in the morning. My brain. My brain was frazzled, dog. I was so like cracked out. It wasn't even funny. Um, and then I started doing Tuesdays, and that's like all of the player I have. Every other time I've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, it has been as a dungeon master.
So, do you find that being a player is enhancing your DMing skills or encouraging you to mature as a DM? No?
Kinda. I not super much. No.
Okay.
It gets me more comfortable with things that I know for my players, information that I know for my players. What do I add for? Okay, okay, so and so, did you hit? What's your roll me a d20? What did you get? And then they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, okay, grab the d20. Okay, roll it. Okay, cool. It's, this modifier plus this modifier plus this modifier. Okay, here's your damage dice. Oh, this damage dice looks like this. Roll that. And I've started to memorize some basic spells. What cure wounds heals
Mm-hmm.
for, what potions heals for, things that I use all the time as a player. Um, Cantrips. I've kind of memorized what cantrips do, the distances for cantrips. I kind of know certain like proficiencies or feats because feats are a big thing in
Yes. Yep.
not only 2014 but also 2024, where you learn how to use feats and stuff like that. Proficiencies, I learn a lot more, because as a DM you don't really need to know proficiencies because monsters don't have weapon proficiencies. They're just given weapons. They don't get to pick. you know they get scimitars. Congratulations, scimitar death. Blech! you know but for a player you get to pick all that stuff. Are you proficient in martial weapons? Are you proficient in simple weapons? Are you proficient in two-handed weapons? All of that stuff I have started to congeal into my dungeon master knowledge
Okay.
because my players have to know it, or I've helped my son build characters for him and his friend, and so I go through the character creation process with him because he's like, "Oh, I want to be Batman." I'm like, "Okay, well, you need to pick this and this and this and this and this, and that's how you be Batman." Or, "Oh, I want to play a barbarian." Okay, well, you need to pick this and this and this and this, and that's how you be a barbarian. And I know that more so from helping to create characters as well as creating my own characters, and I use that information to help my players as a DM. Does it help me being a monster? No. Does it help me being some boss battle monster or boss NPC? Does it help me be Strahd von Zarovich? No. But it helps my players while I am behind the screen.
Well,
So
does it
there's
also
that.
help you become more familiar with game mechanics and game rules, would you say? I would think.
Certain things, there are certain things where I'm like, oh yeah, that's that. You get disadvantage, and I can rattle it off the top of my brain. Whereas before, maybe I couldn't.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know what that is.
Well, it's just more exposure, right? Repetition, repetition.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Pure exposure.
Yep.
What do you call that when you learn a language faster because you're in the language?
Immersion.
Immersion.
Yeah.
Yeah, immersion therapy. Full immersion.
All right. I had one other
Ugh.
thought in there. Oh, um, I was you were talking
Say
about
what's hot
how it
chills me.
affects you as a DM, and that made me think of prep, right? And we touched upon prep earlier. So you said prep on Tuesday or something. So what I did
Thursday.
Thursday. Okay, Thursday. Okay, I thought you said Tuesday earlier. Okay, that makes
Oh
more.
no, Thursday.
That,
Thursday night.
yeah, that makes more sense. I was gonna say I do the same
The
thing.
night before.
I do the day of or the day before to look things over, and depending which game I'm looking at, well, I should say Friday, but the day of or the day before, and depending which game it is, will determine how much attention I need to devote to it, how much time, and to what level do I need to delve into it. Like I said, the Tuesday night game, they were in the town for so long. After a handful of sessions, I barely need to take about 10 minutes to look things over and review, recap last session. As they're pressing forward, I need to spend a little more time to get familiar with that. So my prep time, varies
I
from
don't
week.
think I need to do much prep until they leave the next town.
Well, if there's
To tell you the truth.
if there's going to be combat, there's prep for that.
No. Well, slight, maybe,
Yeah.
if they want to be assholes.
I mean, I'm not saying it has to be a lot, but you want to at least look that over so that at least you're somewhat familiar with it. So when it comes to the actual game session, you're not then trying to become familiar with it, you know?
I think I have to reread the mod because not only am I reading the raw, but I'm also integrating the mod with the raw. So I have to like marry them
Hmm.
in a way that it's not confusing.
Right. So, and that's an example of the need for prep, right? And that's what I have to do
Yeah,
for Friday night as well because I'm doing the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, and 5e redid that.
they did.
And they did a pretty decent job from what I've been reading of it. I'm kind of pleased with it. But as they always do, they overdo it. But nonetheless, I've been able to extract enough from that
All of
to make it a little easier for me. But it does require a little more prep because, like you said, I'm integrating two different
Marion.
things, and worse yet, I'm integrating 5e into 1e in certain aspects. I'm not taking stat blocks or anything, so that makes it kind of easy. So that the integration is not
EC
that
checks.
difficult. But I'm saying, oh well, in 5e they use bugbears, in 1e they use kobolds. Hmm. Okay, well I think well, what am I going to do? So, but even if I take the bugbears, obviously I'm going to use the 1e stat block for that. I'm not going to use a 5e stat block for that. But so my integration is a little more difficult because 5e versus 1e, but not as bad as it could be because I'm not trying to manage or convert stat blocks or anything like that. But
No, I don't think I'm doing that either. Mine's all story. A lot of my mod is story oriented. There is a mod that you can do. It's called Reloaded. It's by another Reddit user, and you can do Cursive Strahd Reloaded. And that is a almost a full overhaul of the entire story and stat blocks. So it's like it's almost a different, not a different game, but it's almost like a version 2.0, and you almost just have to print that and use that. You almost can't even look at the raw. Where the one that I picked, the Mandy's mod, is a lot of flavor. It's a lot of added flavor and cohesive storyline convergence,
which is up your
so that
alley.
I can
That's in your
right.
wheelhouse. Yep.
So I can fix the story because right now, as written, the story is a little disjointed, and that's a lot. That's the biggest con of Curse of Strahd in the raw, is that it is disjointed. The story makes no sense. There's no reason for people to do the things that they do other than the DM pushing them there. Um, Not narratively, but physically.
Right.
Like,
Okay.
you guys have to go here now, kind of deal.
Mm.
Or they'll miss a big chunk of story, or they'll miss the opportunity to do something that is worthwhile. So to pull them there narratively doesn't happen in the raw. It just happens. I don't. It just is a section of the book. There's no like narration to do the things that you do. So a lot of the mod that I have adds the weaving of the story and weaving of the narration to make it a little more cohesive. But
Okay.
you could also claim that as railroading and not as sandbox as it could be.
Well, listen. There's sandboxing. That's a whole. Oh my God, a whole nother topic we could talk about one night. Is the style of game. So sandboxing and railroading are the extremes, right? They truly are opposite end of the spectrum. And it's,
There's also roller coaster,
yep.
sandbox, railroad.
And you really want to be in the middle on that because sandboxing essentially means the characters, the players, have no direction at all, none.
No,
And there's essentially
no,
no campaign at all. You just have a world,
no.
there you go, and do stuff, right?
It's like
Railroading,
Skyrim.
while another term that I'm not a big fan of because it's often misused and abused, just like homebrew. Um, but the railroading, what people call railroading is often not. Often what they're referring to is a linear campaign, right? And generally speaking, I run linear campaigns. Railroading, um, an example of
It's not
railroading
giving your players agency.
agency, right? So what would happen, as an example, is you come up to the castle or whatever. There's a wall, there's a gate. You need to get into the castle or past the outer perimeter. And the character says, "Okay, well, I'm going to go check out the gate and pick the lock." Nope, you can't pick it. Just like that. Okay, well, let me see if I can climb over the wall. Nope, it's too slick. It's covered in oil. You can't do it. All
Okay, well, I
right.
talked to the guard.
Yeah.
Okay, the guard talks to you.
Or no, nope. There's a back door though. You can go through that. Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I guess I'll go through that. That's really
And
railroading when you don't have no agency, no direction. You have to go this
oh
one
yeah.
way.
Hmm.
And not only does that happen too often, usually with bad DMs or immature DMs, new DMs. Um,
Because I said so.
or it's a DM who's very, very unprepared and cannot adjust on the fly or isn't willing to admit, hey guys, I'm sorry, man, I'm really not prepared for that. I'll do the best I can. Or is afraid to say, man, I'm really not ready. So we need to reschedule, right?
Right.
That's usually or often when that happens, when a DM starts railroading. Most often though, it's because of a bad DM.
I am sadly a little, when I did Fandelver, I did this a little bit. Um, but I fixed it. I actually was like, no, let me put my big girl pants on and make something up. Um, the players asked me about where the cultists, the dragon cultists, were taking the dragon. Where's the dragon going? You guys are talking this dragon out of this tower. Where's he going? Where's this whole ass green dragon going? You know? And I was like, I don't know. The campaign doesn't tell me. But instead, and I said that out loud, and then everyone was like, eh, because my table's cool like that. But I was like, you know what? Here, let me try and make something up. So I said, okay, he's going down to Baldur's Gate. He's going down to the depths of Baldur's Gate to insinuate political disruption, and maybe that's another hook into Tyranny of Dragons that we can talk about. Maybe we play Tyranny of Dragons next, because it is in fact a hook. It is, and I didn't realize it was a hook because the campaign didn't tell me it was a hook. If it did, I would have read that and I would have come up with a cool hook, but it didn't. It didn't.
Prep, prep,
So
prep, prep.
I could have prepped, right? I could have done my research. I didn't for Fandelver. It was the book's like this big, I was like, I got this. It's fine. Um, but I do admit to doing that sometimes. I don't know. The campaign doesn't tell me, and then I have to make. And then I'm like, you know what? Here, let me give you. I said, you know what? And I'll make something up. I do get
And
caught. I don't know.
no,
Campaign doesn't tell me.
yeah, no, and it's okay sometimes to do that, right? Sometimes again you need
At
to
least I'm honest.
you need to adjust on the fly. But I will tell you, as a player, while the table might seem like, oh yeah, okay, but the players really they don't want to hear that, right? They don't want to hear
No,
they don't want to hear I
pulls them
don't
out of
know
the
or it doesn't tell me, right? They want you to keep that
fantasy.
continuous,
They want
smooth
the fantasy.
flowing story. Make something up. Is it going to have an impact on the game? In the moment, you didn't think it would, right? So you make up really anything. It doesn't matter. Or you could, even if you didn't know it, there was a plot hook there, which you didn't. You could then take the
No.
opportunity to create a plot hook, right? And I do that with you guys on Tuesday all the time, right? I call
Yeah,
it
and
plant.
I
I
give it
call it
away to the
planting the
party.
seed. Planting the seed. You
Yeah.
call it a plot hook. Same thing. Um, so that's the opportunity comes up for that, right? And
Right.
while my plot hooks are very intentional, because I'm trying to plant the seed in the player's mind of what module, what adventure might they want to play next. So I'm giving them the
Mhm.
opportunities already as to what might be available to them by planting these seeds, these plot hooks. Um, but yeah, you just gotta make stuff up. One of my very early sessions with you,
I need to get better about that.
one of my early sessions, first couple sessions, you did just that. We were approaching a combat, trying to breach a house, breach the door, and I remember specifically I was sitting next to Artie, and he and I, our characters were working together. And while I was being, as a player, I tend to do this, be very tactical and very
Hmm.
granular.
You are.
Okay.
You are.
Um, but it's also kind of like how I learned to play. But so my question to Julie at the moment or at that time was, do I see hinges on the door? Okay. I don't know if you remember this. I said, do I see hinges on the door? She's like, what the fuck do I know, right? Um, and as a player, I should have been better. I should have just told her, hey, this is what we want to do, or been more direct and say, how does the door open? Instead of saying, okay, do I see hinges?
Oh,
Okay, what side are the hinges on? Do I see a knob? Do I see a ring? None of that shit matters. What I'm ultimately getting at as the player is which way does the door open? I should have just been direct and asked her that. But
right.
ultimately we got to that point, and Julie's answer was, Keith, it doesn't tell me. I don't know. You know, and in that moment, that's when I needed you as my DM to just make something up because
Yeah.
it really didn't matter, right? It really wasn't going to impact gameplay ultimately, But for us as the players, it was just going to affect how we described what we wanted to do, what our approach was to breach that door, or who might go first, who might go second, right? But for you as the DM or the bad guys, it didn't have a bearing. But it was important enough to us as a player to ask that, right?
Yeah.
So we needed an answer. So that's an example of one of the times when you just make something up because,
My,
you know,
my ADHD just blurts out the first thing that comes to my brain. Um, so that was my probably my initial reaction. Entire 100% authentic reaction to that question. Um, should I again the Fendelver had no prep. If I had prepped that maybe better, maybe I could have been like, okay, the door's open in, the door's open out. But it doesn't really give you that information because, like what you said, in the long term, does it super matter?
no.
Are there really a lot of 5e players playing that tactically? Maybe, I guess it depends on the group. There's a group that plays every once in a while, and they play all on laptops, and it's like 4 players, and they have like an ass ton of minis and one really bland battle mat, and all I ever see is them on their laptops with the battle mat in the middle, and it looks like they're playing like fantasy Risk. It's really weird.
So, but 5e, you guys like to roll dice for everything. You could have just rolled a dice 50-50 shot which way it opened, um, but
I don't think about that.
the girls on Sunday night did something similar to me on that because they were kind of thinking like I did, like which way does the door open? Because if it opens
Tactically.
this way, I'm going to stand over here. If it opens that way, I'm going to stand over there, right? When we open the door. And I didn't roll for anything, and of course the module doesn't tell you that. No module is going to
No,
be
no,
that
no,
granular, unless there's a
no.
very specific reason for it. So I just thought for a second, if I was building this dungeon, if I was the bad guy and digging this tunnel out or whatever, which way would it open? Which way would be more sense for this door to open? Into the room or out of the room? What would make more sense? And I just went with it in the moment, what I thought would make most sense for the bad guys. That's all.
Right. And I try to think about that too architecturally. You're
Architecturally.
walking yeah, I can't. Blah, 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 blah. My I've been talking too long. I think about it like you're going into a bedroom. It's not going to open in because the bedroom's already smaller than the area you're standing in. So the door will come out because there's space available to the door. You know, if it's a big hall next to a big hall, then it doesn't matter which way it opens, and it could even open both ways because both areas are large. You know, but I digress.
So
I don't. My generalized reactions are just 100% genuine, and I sometimes have no control over them.
so you don't have a poker face. I don't have much of a poker face either.
Nope.
I really don't. To the point where like sometimes I'm DMing for whatever game it is, and I struggle to contain my emotion to not give stuff away.
Oh, I'm so bad.
You
That's
know.
my number one complaint from my players is that I give too much information
Well,
away.
yes,
Well,
you
Chase.
do,
There is
you
main
do.
complaint from Chase is that I give away too
Oh,
much information.
Julie, I don't even play in this Curse of Strahd with you, and I know you give too much stuff away. I'm not even there, and I know that.
I get
I know
excited.
that. I know you get excited and you want to just,
So
but
excited.
remember though, this is what you have to
I
remind
know so
yourself.
much more information than them.
I know, but the more you share, the more fun you're going to steal from them.
Yeah, I don't want that.
So,
I told they wanted there was something and they were talking about something. There was a bunch of chanting happening in the basement, and they're like, "Can I roll a religion check to see what the chanting is for?" And I was like, "Well, you guys got a letter. Strahd himself told you that he told them that he wasn't their messiah." I said, there's probably some history there. And I said, if you guys want, I can either give you the history as like a sidebar and you guys can get the backstory as a sidebar, or you can fucking ask Strahd. He would probably love to talk to you about it. Go ahead, ask him. Ask him when you see him. Try and initiate that conversation because he would probably enjoy talking to you. I said, you want to talk to him about that letter you found that he wrote? Go ahead, do it. Talk to him, and thus giving them an RP opportunity. Hey, what about that death house down the road? So Strahd, you know about that. What's up with that death house down the road? And it would give me a great opportunity to be fucking cocky ass Strahd and trump all over my players.
so you know that I make I don't want to say I don't want to quite say it like this, but I make the players work for their knowledge, for their characters. I
Oh yeah,
I
I
I,
don't.
I don't do a lot of lore
I
dump.
should be better.
I don't
Ow.
I don't just disclose everything at the start of the campaign. Of course, there's a little bit of background, a little bit of history. Hey, this is how you guys got here. But throughout, I kind of make your role play it out to a point.
Hmm.
There's also a point where I'll introduce an NPC for the point of interjecting that information, right? And again,
Yeah.
I'm taking notes here, by the way, as to other topics we can talk about. Types of NPCs, and you and I have brushed upon this
Oh, the
before
7
in,
types
in,
of
in Discord, right?
NPCs,
The different types of NPCs.
which I could interject into a campaign if necessary, but I think mine are all built in.
Oh,
I don't think
because 5e lays out everything for you. It really. Oh, okay, I'm gonna take a quick stab at 5e. The creators of these 5e modules completely take away the DM's agencies, completely take away the DM's creativity because they put
I'm too busy.
everything out there, and
I like it.
every friggin' 5e DM feels as though they need to go by the book and do this.
Well, I have mods, so I obviously did not go by the book,
It
but I do like having the direction because I'm too busy to make my own direction.
Oh, I get it as a direction.
Yeah,
But it should act as that though, as a guide in your direction, a compass heading. That's it. How the DM gets from here to there should be up to the
yeah.
DM. As an and this is for me, this would be an extreme example.
I have one shots that are like that. One shots are
In
very because they're written by other people. They give you like bullet points, and you have to fill in all of the role play by yourself.
so on Tuesday we're doing against the cult of the reptile. No. Excuse me, on Friday we're doing Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. And in 1E, the friggin' module says, "Oh, there's a city called Saltmarsh, and you should create it and put these type of characters in it."
I remember that.
Yeah. So
Here, make this whole city.
So that
Enjoy.
so that is a very
I hope
flagrant
you like
and
it.
extreme example of allowing DM agency. A little too much for me, but it still serves as a good example. Now, the complete opposite is 5e has every friggin' detail possible, even the NPC's motives and what
Backgrounds.
their background is, all this shit. No,
How to
man.
role play the NPC
Yes,
sometimes isn't
no,
even
like,
its own box.
oh my
Yeah.
God, like so. And if you're in a town, okay, so Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh as an example, in 5e had the whole town. And in the moment, I appreciated that because I didn't have time to come up with the whole town, so I kind of stole it. But in there, it had a few key NPCs. When I say a few, like a half a dozen, and tell me how to role play each of these individual characters. Well, if I want to do that, that's more prep time, right? And it takes away from my creativity as to how I would like to play.
Role play.
The
Yeah.
NPCs, all of them, monsters included, are NPCs. The
Are
NPCs
you?
is where the DM gets to play, right?
Hmm.
Because I don't have a character. I have
It's
hundreds
my
of
game
them,
too.
right? I have hundreds of them, which is great. I'm versatile, but I don't get to play them long term, so I really need to enjoy them when I have them. And when that campaign spelled it out, it took away that agency from me. So it's
Hmm.
great to have it as a guide, but I think too many DMs take that as law. They really play rules as written. They'll open up that Curse of Strahd or the Ghost of Saltmarsh, something like that. It's called in 5e,
Yeah,
and really
it is.
try to play those characters as
Ghosts.
they are. And I think that's
Yeah.
too much for the DM to have that all spelled out for them ahead of time. For me, I say, okay, this is this character, this is their role in the town. Hmm, I think we're going to play it like that. And that's as far as I make it. And in the moment, we play it and hope I remember how to play it next time. But all right, Julie, it is getting a little late. I think we've touched on plenty enough tonight. If there's anything else you want to add, I'm more than willing to stay on here with you a little longer. But we're at about our 2 hour mark, which is usually about
Yeah,
our
we're a little
duration.
past.
So well, we got a little bit of a late start as we were testing our video and stuff.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we
Yeah,
started like 8:15,
yeah,
8:20.
give or take. So we're about 2 hours, give or
Yeah.
take. So, um, okay, so my test for you or challenge for you is while we are unscripted and kind of always will be, um, if you want to come up with just a topic or something we want to touch upon next week, um, a couple things I jotted down was talking about random encounters,
Mhm.
pacing,
Mhm.
and how to make combat faster. And I'm not talking no initiative combat,
Didn't you
but how to make combat faster.
did you
Oh,
you also
NPCs.
yeah, NPCs. But also you remember when James was talking about a no initiative thing that he was thinking about like adding like movement wise. Do you remember like, oh, I'll keep that, I'll jot that down. I can't remember where it is. We had a discussion one Friday night, and I was doing no initiative discussions, and I
Hmm.
was like, Keith, help me, and you were like, no, I
Yeah,
don't want to help, and I'm like, no, you stay here and help me.
I I do remember that. I'd have to go back and read through the chat on that. That does sound familiar, but I don't remember what it was.
You thought James's idea was very interesting, and you wanted to talk to me about it during a fireside chat.
Well,
Um,
well, we'll have to go
I
back and look at
also
that.
would have you ever heard of boss like boss fights, like where boss fights
Yeah,
have
yeah,
different
yeah.
rules than traditional combat fights.
Oh,
I would also I don't know the necessarily the actual mechanics to it, but it would be interesting to look into and like talk about. I would love to do a fireside chat of boss fights.
okay, okay.
But
All right,
you
I'm
know,
not
whatever.
familiar with that, but okay. All right, so I will message
I always thought it was interesting.
I'll message these thoughts here to you that we just talked about just now, and that way you can choose it for next time. So I know you got to run. So I will message you, I'll text you, whatever, when we're going to do this again. So it'll be in about a
What is
weekend,
Sunday?
not this Sunday, it'll be the following.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so in a week and a
Never
half,
mind.
and then from there we'll go every other Sunday.
Okay.
So, all right, Julie, you have a good night, and I will see you Friday. All right, peace out, girl.
Bye.